the scene outside a guild-affiliated tavern at night, a familiar gathering spot for hunters after intense grinding sessions. The atmosphere in the tavern suddenly shifted as a tall figure stepped in, and the pink-haired waitress rushed to greet this VIP guest. A rough, gloved hand placed sparkling purple magic crystals onto the table, clinking with the scent of money. The waitress smiled and asked if Sir Slayer would like his usual, her eyes fixed on the familiar customer. Slayer revealed himself with the appearance of a grizzled veteran, his clothes stained with monster blood, proving he had just been through a serious battle. A close-up of Slayer's majestic face, his right eye covered by a magic eye patch, exuding the aura of the strongest. He slumped into a chair, looking exhausted yet still incredibly cool, briefly confirming his order, while the surrounding crowd began to whisper. The entire tavern seemed to erupt when news spread that Slayer had single-handedly conquered a god-tier dungeon and returned safely, as if it were an everyday occurrence. The rookies stared wide-eyed at the pile of loot, and a burly man declared that each purple crystal was worth billions of molar coins, an insane amount. The female adventurer with glasses explained to the newcomer that Slayer was a hidden magnate, always donating all that money to upgrade guild equipment and support the new recruits. The burly bearded man rattled on, asserting that if it weren't for our leader, Slayer, carrying the team, this guild would have fallen apart ages ago. In the eyes of the low-level hunters, Slayer was nothing short of a living saint, a supreme entity to be worshipped absolutely. The image shattered in an instant, as Slayer's mischievous hand smacked the waitress' plump backside in broad daylight. The old man chuckled wickedly, bluntly remarking that her figure was nowhere near as fiery as her grandmother's used to be. The enraged waitress gave a hard shove, sending the living god tumbling backward onto his chair, his wineglass flying into the air. Her face flushed crimson with anger, she yelled, asking if the old man was tired of living, daring to grope her like that. Even while sprawled on the floor, Slayer remained unrepentant, pointing and adding a taunt that her fierce temper was just like her old lady's. Witnessing this blasphemous scene, all three adventurers simultaneously spat out the beer in their mouths, utterly shocked. The rookie turned to the burly bearded man with a look of existential doubt, unable to believe that lecherous old man was the god he had just praised. The burly bearded man could only cough awkwardly, sweat pouring down him, and reluctantly confirmed with a forced smile. The scene shifted to the adventurers' table, where the atmosphere grew more serious, as all three began discussing current affairs. The rookie excitedly recounted the historic event, when the Demon King and his minions were driven back to their old world by a mysterious figure. The woman with sunglasses rested her chin on her hand, curiously asking if the young man still pursued his passion for drawing comics these days. The young man grinned brightly, showing off a comic book about the mysterious hero, asserting that he admired that person far more than the drunken old man. Slayer. The comic page depicted the tragic scene where the hero sacrificed himself to send the Demon King to his demise. According to the rumors Head picked up, that savior was Earth's first hunter and possessed overwhelming power even at a very young age. The battle's outcome was the Demon King's sealing, which led to the opening of spatial gates, allowing humanity to awaken superpowers. Slayer tilted his head back, draining his glass of red wine, silently listening to the praises of the past from the younger generation. He slammed the empty glass hard onto the table, creating a dry clatter that cut short the youngster's conversation. Without a word, his white-gloved hand placed 3 gold coins on the table to pay. Then he prepared to leave. Slayer stood up, adjusted his attire, and coldly announced, "I'm leaving," causing the atmosphere to immediately dampen. The waitress looked bewildered, not understanding what was happening, wondering why the big boss had just arrived and was already rushing off before his seat was even warm. The old man leaned in close, his face full of pressure, placed a hand on Xiao Shui's head, and lowered his voice to apologize, confessing he had only come to see her face one last time. Xiao Shui's face turned beet red, her cheeks puffed out, as she threatened to chop off his hand if the old lecher dared to touch her backside again. Slayer's face became unusually solemn. He gave his word of honor not to repeat it, and uttered a farewell heavy with the scent of parting. Xiao Shui was stunned, a premonition telling her something was wrong, so she urgently pressed him. "What in the world do you mean?" Ignoring her question, Slayer turned sharply and walked away, his back exuding the loneliness of someone about to head into battle. He strode past Xiao Shui decisively, leaving her rooted to the spot, her face filled with extreme anxiety as she watched him go. The crimson word Slayer appeared against a black background, like a bloody death sentence for the monsters. That name represented endless slaughter, a terrifying dread and absolute destruction that would sweep away all enemies in the darkness. Slayer's solitary back trudged through the ruined buildings under a blood-red sky. The old man calmly raised a hand to light a cigarette. the dry click of the lighter echoing in the deadly silence. His scarred face and cool black eye patch became clear beneath the wisps of white cigarette smoke, full of a weathered charm. Slayer held the cigarette between his fingers, his eyes deep in thought, contemplating something extremely important before the great battle. He looked up at the blood moon hanging high above, exhaling a long, moody puff of smoke. His remaining eye narrowed dangerously, as he affirmed that the end of everything was drawing very near. Slayer continued to puff on his cigarette, maintaining an unusual calm that completely contrasted with the fiery catastrophe around him. The entire city below had transformed into a desolate battlefield, strewn with wrecked vehicles and rubble. Memories flooded back to 60 years ago, when the Demon King and 7 demon generals tore through space to invade the human realm. Skyscrapers collapsed with thunderous roars, sending civilians screaming in panic, desperately fleeing for their lives. A giant, brutal monster tore apart the body of an unfortunate victim, splattering fresh blood across the screen in a horrifying display. The hideous earthworm monster opened its crimson maw, full of sharp teeth, and let out a terrifying roar amidst the ruins. A colossal black dragon rose in the middle of the city, causing civilians to scream in panicked, desperate pleas for help as death loomed. Amidst the hazy smoke and fire of the explosion, Hao Yan desperately clutched Yingying's heavily injured body on the cold ground. Hao Yan, tears welling in his eyes, supported his beloved, his hand still gripping an iron bar, but he watched helplessly as her life slowly ebbed away from her severe wounds. Hao Yan's face contorted in pain. He gritted his teeth and called Yingying's name in utter despair as he saw her fading. Yingying, with her last ounce of strength, placed a hand on his chest, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth as she weakly urged Hao Yan to quickly flee to save his life. The girl's arm fell limply to the ground, creating a dry thud that signaled her life had completely extinguished. Hao Yan's tears streamed down his beloved's face as her final dying words still echoed in his ears, urging him to run. Hao Yan's eyes widened, filled with haunting pain. He looked up at the sky and let out a heart-wrenching scream of anguish at the immense tragedy. Hao Yan screamed in utter despair, his heart-rending cry of "no" echoing amidst the bloody tragedy that had just unfolded. A rough, sinewy hand violently tore through space, creating brilliant purple energy cracks accompanied by a sharp, tearing sound. The living legend appeared imposingly, his back firm, standing defiantly before the dark spatial gate surging with power. The veteran's scarred face hardened, his cold, sharp eyes gleaming with unshakable resolve. He pressed the tip of his shoe firmly onto the cold ground, decisively crushing the finished cigarette to prepare for battle. The tough old man walked alone straight into the final god-tier dungeon, where death chi hung thick. Without a moment's hesitation, he muttered, confirming the ultimate objective deep within this dangerous lair was the memory stone. Inside, the dungeon was a desolate and ruined landscape, with pillars of scorching fire burning everywhere like a living hell. A gigantic blazing red fire dragon appeared with a terrifying roar, its entire body enveloped in scorching flames. The monster laughed loudly in surprise, then bowed its head, admitting defeat before the unimaginable power of that small human. A gigantic, spiraling force descended, crushing the fire dragon's body and creating a terrifying shockwave throughout the space. Slayer walked away proudly, leaving behind the collapsing lower half of the monster, which was still muttering in disbelief at its defeat. A dry thud echoed as the living legend landed safely, ignoring the smoke, fire, and debris fiercely erupting behind him. He stood tall amidst the sea of hellfire, exuding the domineering aura of one who had just conquered a god-tier dungeon. The old man coldly cut off the dragon's dying words, declaring that he was in a hurry and had no time to listen to its plight. He raised his white-gloved hand, activating his dismantling skill, turning the dragon's corpse into countless blazing red cubes for loot. A shimmering golden orb flew neatly into Slayer's hand, marking the complete end of the dungeon's boss. He confirmed the item in his hand was indeed the memory stone, the crucial treasure he had painstakingly sought for so long. The scene shifted to a dark memory under the rain, where a mysterious shadow stood proudly over the corpse of the dead dragon. The young man in the white suit appeared with a cruel smile, his hand dangling the bloody skull of the recently slaughtered monster. Amidst the desolate ruins, the bitter question of the meaning of existence echoed as death enveloped everything. The young man in the white suit collapsed to his knees in a sea of crimson blood, letting out a desperate scream as he realized he had lost everything. He clutched his distorted face, bitterly admitting the harsh truth that his family, friends, and comrades were all completely gone. His bloodshot eye, veined with red, peered through the gaps in his fingers, tormenting himself about the purpose of fighting when there was no one left to protect. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoed in the darkness, guiding him to the memory stone located in some god-tier dungeon. The voice urged him to set off immediately, to use the stone's power to turn back time and rectify his mistakes. The young man flinched, dropping his hands from his face, utterly surprised by the guidance from the void in his most desperate moment. He frantically looked around with a dazed expression, shouting to ask who was babbling in his head. Memories flashed through the days he plunged into slaughtering monsters like a machine, dedicating his entire life to relentless searching and fighting. Back in reality, Slayer clutched the glowing blue stone in his hand, his eyes resolute, like one who had fulfilled his lifelong wish. Slayer swung his hand, creating a surge of immense energy that pushed back the monsters in his mind, asserting that the fear of loss was what had kept him going for the past 50 years. Slayer extended his hand forward, his bandaged right eye now glowing with crimson magic amidst deadly laser beams. He clenched the blazing red stone in his hand, the light from the item resonating powerfully with the enchantment on his right eye. A gigantic red pillar of light erupted amidst the desolate ruins, tearing through the night as the time reversal ritual officially began. Slayer threw his head back and screamed in despair, betting everything to beg to be sent back 60 years. His hand was gradually engulfed by white light, his body beginning to vanish into the void to perform the time leap. His soul eye stared wide open, haunted, witnessing the moment reality shattered before the power of the divine stone. He shot up in bed, gasping for breath, drenched in sweat, staring blankly at the darkness enveloping the cramped bedroom. What caught his eye was a collection of female character figures and a Captain America shield on top of the cabinet, making him exclaim in astonishment that he had returned. Looking at the digital clock showing past 5 in the morning and the photo of Yingying still smiling on the table, he was stunned to realize he had truly returned to the past. He froze, his soul eye wide open as he heard the familiar sound coming from his phone. The old man lunged off the bed, hastily grabbing the smartphone, vibrating intensely on the nightstand. His rough fingers slid across the touchscreen, hastily accepting the incoming call with extreme nervousness. Slayer knelt on the cold floor, pressing the phone tightly to his ear, his entire body tense like a string about to snap. His other hand clutched the hem of his shirt, veins bulging as he struggled to suppress the storm of emotions threatening to erupt. He gritted his teeth, inwardly screaming, urging the other end of the line to quickly respond. The moment the connection beep sounded, and the name Hao Yan was uttered, his aged face completely changed color. The girl's voice, full of sleepiness, gently complained about being woken up at dawn without understanding what was happening. A hot tear fell and shattered on the floor, his mind screaming in utter joy because she was still alive. Slayer clamped his hand over his mouth to stifle his choked sobs, even as the girl on the other end of the line repeatedly asked worriedly. Hao Yan collapsed in the darkness, his hand trembling as he held the phone as if fearing it would vanish, his mouth uttering the name he had etched into his heart in ultimate agony. He pressed the phone to his ear, his scarred, aged face in his mind, still daring not to believe the truth as he called out the affectionate nickname from long ago to confirm. On the other end, Yingying sat up in bed in her disheveled nightgown, completely bewildered, not understanding why this guy was calling her in the middle of the night and babbling her name. She frowned worriedly, thinking he had a terminal illness or a high fever that damaged his brain because his voice sounded so strange and pathetic, as if he were on the verge of death. A cruel contrast emerged as the reflection of the old war god in the mirror stood in complete opposition to the student boy whom she had invited over to copy homework. A surge of green energy swirled in his hand, sweeping away the image of the scarred, one-eyed old man as if washing away the dust of the mortal world and the burden of 60 years of war. The aged facade shattered and vanished into the void, revealing Hao Yan's youthful face, struggling to suppress intense emotion at the sound of his beloved's voice. Hao Yan hastily fabricated an excuse that his voice was hoarse from just waking up to cover it, trying to act as normal as possible to urge the girl to continue the conversation. Tears streamed down his youthful face like rain. He could no longer hold back and choked out a confession of the intense longing that had tormented his heart for a lifetime. While he was pouring out his heart about 60 years of unforgettable suffering, Yingying cringed on her bed, utterly bewildered because they had clearly only met that morning. Yingying's face turned crimson with embarrassment and fatigue. She intended to hang up and go to sleep, unable to handle this unusual enthusiasm. Hao Yan, dressed in a dashing white suit, smiled confidently and told her to wait, that she wouldn't be able to escape. Without a second's hesitation, he shot out of his room like an arrow, boldly declaring that he was rushing to her place immediately. She frantically refused, saying it was too late and she was afraid of making noise that would disturb her roommate's sleep. He brushed aside all worries, stomped his foot firmly on the floor, and promised to act gently, disturbing no one. Hao Yan's figure glided through the night street at terrifying speed, leaving blurred streaks of streetlights behind him. He ran, laughing heartily, his old memories telling him that if he just ran straight down this road, he would reach his beloved's home. Emotions burst forth on his radiant face. He remembered every minute detail, from the number of lampposts to the scent of the night wind. A dazzling surge of emotion exploded in his mind, marking the proud return of one who had once lost everything. In the blink of an eye, Hao Yan stood at the foot of the apartment building, looking up at the lit window and announcing his arrival. Hao Yan stood at the foot of the building, making a call, his eyes fixed on the window where Yingying had just opened it to check the situation. Yingying leaned out onto the balcony in her loose-fitting spaghetti-strap nightgown, scolding him as a madman for daring to cause a commotion in the dead of night. Her face flushed, dotted with sweat, flustered by her boyfriend's sudden, relentless assault. Hao Yan reached towards the sky with a radiant smile, urging her to come down immediately so they could go stargazing together. As soon as she stepped into the hall, Yingying put her hands on her hips and questioned Hao Yan, asking what was wrong with him to act so strangely. Without a word of explanation, Hao Yan rushed forward, pulled her tightly into his embrace, and called out his beloved's name with extreme emotion. He buried his head into her shoulder, inhaling the warmth of reality, cherishing every second he held the girl he thought he had lost forever. Held so tightly she could barely breathe, Yingying lightly tapped his chest, complaining, but her eyes held a sweet, resigned look. Hao Yan pleaded to hold her a little longer, and she sighed, reluctantly agreeing to indulge this lovesick fool. Under the city's quiet night sky, two figures merged into one, savoring a rare moment of peace before the storm arrived. Hao Yan stared intently at his beloved with fiery eyes from extremely close range, making Yingying blush furiously with embarrassment. She nervously asked what was wrong with this idiot, who kept staring at her as if he wanted to devour her whole. Hao Yan squinted, scrutinizing his girlfriend's chest, then mumbled, comparing if the current size matched his memories. Yingying quickly covered herself with her hands, then snapped, asking where this pervert's eyes were glued to. Without giving her time to react or escape, he decisively reached out and firmly grasped her slender wrist. Hao Yan executed a divine wall slam, completely freezing her due to the extreme proximity and sudden dominance. Yingying's eyes widened, brimming with tears as she looked at him, her heart pounding erratically, and her mouth could only stammer out a single word. He pressed his face close to hers and bluntly declared that she didn't need breast augmentation, because he found a flat screen perfectly fine. As soon as he finished speaking, Hao Yan's sly face revealed excessive curiosity, and he even drooled when repeating the words, breast augmentation. He lunged at the beauty like a hungry beast, making Yingying gasp and fall backward, stammering as she thought he wanted to do something improper right there. Yingying flinched violently and screamed, her face flushed crimson from her boyfriend's audacious inspection. Hao Yan couldn't believe his hands. He squeezed and checked the real thing, muttering in wonder that she hadn't gotten any enhancements. Unlike what he remembered, Yingying went berserk, her eyes bloodshot, as she swung her fist and yelled, warning Hao Yan that he would lose his hands if he dared to act so recklessly again. A heaven-sent smack landed squarely on the unlucky young man's skull, creating a sharp, resounding thud. Hao Yan sat on the ground, clutching the bump on his head, utterly bewildered because his gentle dream girlfriend was nothing like the fiery shrew standing with her hands on her hips before him. Ignoring the domestic violence, his large hand firmly grasped her small one to begin a romantic moment. Yingying's attitude did a 180-degree turn. She happily pulled his hand, flying into the air, excitedly inviting him to go stargazing as they had planned. The two figures walked hand in hand through the quiet park under the peaceful, star-filled night sky. Both sat on the grass. Yingying drew her knees up and smiled radiantly, confessing that she had secretly snuck out just to stargaze with him for a while. Hao Yan gazed at his beloved's beautiful face with deep affection, making her blush slightly with shyness. Hao Yan sat on the grass, stargazing with his girlfriend, taking the opportunity to flirt, saying he missed her terribly, even though they hadn't been apart for long. Yingying blushed shyly, nervously tucking her hair back as she subtly reminded him that they had just met that morning. Hao Yan stared at his beloved with deep affection, humming in his throat, as if wanting to engrave this rare moment of peace into his memory. His gaze suddenly turned sharp and cold, as he swore that in 3 days, he would definitely protect everyone from the impending disaster. The scene shifted to a wild forest on the city's outskirts. A steady footstep on the ground signaled the arrival of a new variable. Hao Yan stood tall, calculating the time. He knew the Demon King would descend in 48 hours, and hoped this regression still retained his peak power. He closed his eyes tightly, concentrating his mind, preparing to activate a summoning ritual or receive power from another timeline. A brilliant golden lightning bolt tore through the night sky, striking the ground with terrifying destructive power, accompanied by a deafening explosion. In the center of the smoking, charred crater, An old man in a cloak hovered in the air with an overwhelming aura, like a deity. It was the legendary Slayer, with his white hair and beard and a glowing red magic eye patch, his sharp gaze seemingly piercing through the soul of anyone he faced. The Slayer stood proudly in the sky with his arms crossed, a smirk on his face as he declared that he had only unleashed 1% of his power. Yet his control remained perfectly flawless. The old man snapped his fingers skillfully, his eyes flashing with excitement, as if about to perform a magnificent magic trick. The shattered, jagged ground, after his superhero landing, began to shake violently. The fragments immediately rewound time, automatically piecing themselves back together, and the word restoration appeared, signaling that the formidable terrain repair skill was complete. A steady foot in a shiny black leather shoe stepped onto the newly regenerated ground, displaying a terrifying calmness. The Slayer dramatically flung his cloak, pointed directly at his opponent, and challenged that he would make this self-proclaimed Demon King kneel and sing the song Conquest. The scene changed dizzyingly fast, the setting immediately shifting back to the peaceful gate of High School number 13, under a clear blue sky. Hao Yan walked into class with the cool demeanor of a seasoned veteran, making his red-haired friend at the desk to his right look up in wonder. When asked why he wasn't with his girlfriend, Hao Yan closed his eyes and bluntly declared that a woman's heart was the most unpredictable thing in the world. His friend chuckled, teasing him about this sudden profound philosophy, leaving Hao Yan speechless and sweating profusely. Huo Xin smirked mischievously, teasing about Hao Yan disappearing in the middle of the night to fool around with a girl, while the victim could only silently endure. When his friend mocked him as a timid old man who only dared to hold hands, Hao Yan suddenly remembered he was disguised as a young man and had to act more convincingly to fit in. The young man scratched his head, chuckling innocently, spouting excuses, but inwardly he was terrified of his true identity being exposed. Huo Xin narrowed his eyes, suspicious that his friend looked disheveled and strange today, making Hao Yan sweat profusely, wondering if his act was convincing enough. His best friend put an arm around his shoulder, smirking, and probed if Hao Yan had been drained of all his energy last night, leaving him utterly speechless. Seeing his friend's carefree smile, the image of the old Slayer appeared in his memory, making Hao Yan feel a pang of nostalgia for his innocent, naive youth. Hao Yan bluffed that their relationship was innocent to cover up, twirling his pen to appear diligent, but his mind was busy planning long-term strategies for the future. Huo Xin excitedly announced the overnight spring picnic, painting a beautiful picture of flirting with girls to entice his best friend to join. Hao Yan's face darkened, filled with killing intent, as he remembered that this very fated trip was when Huo Xin tragically lost his life in the previous timeline. Horrifying memories flooded back, showing the giant flower-headed monster devastating the city, signaling that the tragedy was about to repeat. Horrifying memories flooded back. Huo Xin lay gasping for breath under the rubble, weakly calling his friend's name as the disgusting flower-headed monster closed in. Fresh blood splattered, staining the entire frame red, signaling a gruesome and brutal death. Huo Xin coughed up a large mouthful of blood, his eyes wide with horror as the monster's sharp tentacles pierced through his chest. Hao Yan screamed his friend's name in utter despair, but Yingying, tears streaming down her face, desperately dragged him away to save their lives. Amidst the pouring rain, the monster used its tentacles to lift Huo Xin's limp corpse high into the air like a trophy. The dry crunch of bones and flesh echoed as the monster's mouth, full of sharp teeth, slammed shut, finishing off its prey. Back in reality, Hao Yan bit his pen, sweating coldly, deciding to keep silent, knowing that talking about the disaster 2 days later would only make him seem like a crazy person causing panic. Huo Xin gaped at his best friend as if he were an alien, unable to believe his ears when he heard Hao Yan declare he wanted to focus on his studies. Caught holding the book upside down, Hao Yan playfully punched his friend, then covered it up by saying he needed to focus on the big event the day after tomorrow, promising to party hard once it was over. The door closed, marking Hao Yan's departure, and he began to secretly prepare for the upcoming life-or-death battle. Yingying walked into the classroom, making Hao Yan's eyes fixate on the figure of the one he loved, whom he thought he had lost, now appearing in flesh and blood right before him. Huo Xin sat next to him, smirking and teasing his best friend for being completely ignored by his crush, who wouldn't even spare him a glance. Catching his impolite stare, Yingying blushed, turned back, and scolded him fiercely, calling him a pervert. Hao Yan clutched his forehead helplessly, admitting that he had been a bit too excited last night, causing his mind to lose control with some sensitive, forbidden images. A lunchbox, carefully wrapped in a pink cloth, was presented before him, breaking the awkward atmosphere. She blushed furiously, explaining that she was only bringing him lunch on behalf of her parents, fearing he'd die young from eating too much instant ramen, and that she had no other intentions. Hao Yan's eyes crinkled as he happily accepted the beauty's kind gesture, nodding briskly as if he fully understood her heart. Seeing the sentimental scene, Huoxian immediately added fuel to the fire, boldly declaring that Yingying would definitely be Hao Yan's virtuous wife and filial daughter-in-law in the future. Yingying bristled, vehemently refuting him and calling him a weirdo to hide her face, which was burning red with embarrassment. She quickly turned away, avoiding the gazes of the two boys, reminding them to behave as class was about to start, while Hao Yan still cherished the precious lunchbox. Huoxian smirked, warning that once they were married, Hao Yan would soon grow tired of his wife's cooking. Despite his best friend enthusiastically trying to play matchmaker, Hao Yan brushed him off, asserting that he only loved the carefree life of a happy bachelor. The insistent ringing of the bell cut short the two young men's nonsensical conversation. The bald teacher on the podium continued to ramble on about the exam, not caring in the slightest about the students' minds, which were clearly elsewhere. Hao Yan sat lost in thought, chin in hand, feeling the present reality was utterly alien and wondering if those 60 years of bloody solitude were just a long dream. The sky outside suddenly shook with deafening explosions, tearing apart the peaceful atmosphere. Sensing the familiar killing intent and tremors, Hao Yan startled and spun around, his eyes sharp with suspicion. The entire city reeled in an earthquake, buildings violently shaking as if about to collapse under the invisible destructive power. The students in the classroom were in utter panic, their faces drained of color as they witnessed a gigantic pillar of smoke and fire rising from the east side of the city. Hao Yan sprang to his feet with a serious expression. He realized the disaster had begun but was still inwardly shocked because it was happening much earlier than in his memories from his previous life. Hao Yan's gaze turned cold and resolute. He confirmed that his ominous premonition was entirely accurate. Huoxian broke out in a cold sweat, muttering to reassure himself that he was worrying needlessly, while Yingying stood behind him with a face full of anxiety. Ignoring his classmates who were staring blankly out the window, Hao Yan turned his back decisively, declaring that he had to go check the situation immediately. Yingying's eyes widened in speechless astonishment as she watched Hao Yan dash out of the classroom door, already equipped with a set of grappling gear. Hao Yan activated his propulsion system, soaring like an arrow through the deserted corridor at terrifying speed. He used his grappling hooks to swing and launch himself skillfully up the staircases to reach the rooftop as quickly as possible. A swirling green light signaled that the transformation process had begun. Transformed into the legendary Slayer, with his silver beard and red eye patch, he confidently asserted that in this form, no one would recognize his true identity. Slayer launched himself into the air, using his grappling hooks to leap across tall buildings under a sky as red as doomsday. He landed softly yet powerfully on the edge of the rooftop, his cloak billowing against the chaotic scene below. A gaping purple spatial gate suddenly tore open in the sky, unleashing a horde of monsters, leaving Slayer stunned that this disaster was happening earlier than anticipated. The entire city violently shook as giant monsters furiously smashed tall buildings and spread terror everywhere. Slayer stood motionless on the edge of the rooftop, his cloak fluttering in the wind as he coldly observed the hellish scene below. A colossal monster charged, crushing innocent civilians who were desperately crying out for their loved ones. A winged demon snatched an unfortunate victim into the air and crushed them, while corpses lay scattered beside mangled cars. The ferocious red dragon opened its maw full of sharp teeth, spewing forth a torrent of hellfire that incinerated the panicked crowd fleeing below. Witnessing the brutal scene, Slayer's eyes narrowed with fury, and he roared loudly to attract everyone's attention. He clenched his fists until his veins bulged, grinding his teeth in bitter frustration that the end of the world had arrived so quickly. Standing defiantly amidst the ruins, he boldly declared that he was now on a different level, no longer the useless kid Hao Yan of 60 years ago. The glowing red magic eye behind his eye patch flashed with killing intent, and he growled, preparing to announce his name and begin his counter-slaughter of the monsters. The name Slayer appeared in blazing red on the screen, a declaration of his mission born to slaughter demon lords. Below on the ground, the monsters were still rampaging, turning the entire city into desolate rubble. A violent surge of dark purple energy swirled in midair, signaling the appearance of a formidable boss. The dry clatter of death's hooves echoed as a clawed hoof stepped out of the void. The white-haired demon general, riding a colossal skeletal horse, appeared arrogantly, surprised that someone in this world knew his true title. He narrowed his bloodshot eyes with disdain, then coldly demanded the identity of the audacious challenger. Slayer activated his grappling gear and shot straight towards him like an arrow, roaring a sarcastic reply in his face. "I am your grandpa." The demon general scoffed at the lame joke, casually gathering a pink-purple energy orb in his hand to return the favor. A destructive energy beam shot out, tearing through space. Accompanied by a death sentence for the arrogant one, the attack collided, creating a shocking explosion that flung everything around in a sea of fire and dust. The demon general's bloodshot eyes widened, his face clearly showing horror as he realized his destructive attack had no effect whatsoever. From within the thick dust cloud, Slayer burst forth like a god of war, his body without a single scratch, ready to teach the demon a lesson he'd never forget. The tough old man grabbed his opponent and flung him around in midair like trash, hitting him while yelling for him to go back to the pigsty he crawled out of. Slayer hovered high above with the demeanor of a superior being, looking down at the demon general who had just been punched and sent plummeting miserably to the ground. The demon general wiped a streak of purple blood from his lip, bewildered, wondering if he was truly bleeding before a mere human. Not giving his opponent a moment to breathe, Slayer summoned two colossal golden energy hands that illuminated the entire sky, declaring he would imprison him in eternal darkness. He unleashed a decisive strike, the giant hands of light mimicking his movements, surging forward with pressure that crushed all resistance. The entire space violently shook as Slayer controlled the divine hands, tearing through the battlefield and cornering his opponent. Veins bulging on his face, Slayer let out an earth-shattering roar as he officially unlocked 100% of his ultimate power. The demon general stood frozen, watching Slayer twist and close the void gate with his bare hands, muttering in disbelief that it was just a cheap magic trick. Slayer tensed every muscle, electricity coursing around him as if he would explode, and he roared, ordering the damn gate to be closed immediately before it was too late. The demon general stood dumbfounded before the spatial gate, which was blazing with purple energy, feeling the terrifying pressure emanating from his opponent. Purple blood streamed from the corner of his mouth, but the demon general still wore an arrogant smile, chuckling as if watching an amusing human farce. Slayer's two colossal energy hands clapped together with mountain-moving, sea-filling power, completely sealing the space and crushing everything within, with a shocking explosion. Hovering in midair after the decisive blow, Slayer let out a sigh of relief and muttered, confirming that the gate closure was a complete success. No sooner had he finished speaking than the tough old man's body ran out of energy, and Slayer fell freely from above to the ground like a broken kite, plummeting at dizzying speed. A loud explosion echoed as Slayer hit the ground with a thud, the legend's weight shattering the road surface and kicking up dust, sending the nearby civilians scattering in panic. Even though the gate was closed, the giant monsters were still there. Mutated rats and insects were frantically destroying tall buildings, making the people scream in despair. True to his name as a living legend, Slayer immediately sprang up from the rubble, spinning in midair to gain momentum and continue the slaughter of the remaining monsters. He plunged down like a meteor, delivering a mountain-shattering, rock-crushing punch to the head of the giant multi-eyed monster, sending purple blood splattering everywhere. Slayer gracefully glided through the air, dodging the vibrant purple energy tentacles that were lashing furiously at him. He stood proudly on the corpse of the giant insect he had just defeated, striking an incredibly cool pose for the camera, broadcasting the scene live. The tough old man let out a sigh of relief, his face drenched in sweat but filled with satisfaction as he declared that everything was finally over. In another peaceful corner of the city, Hao Yan's parents called home, reminding their precious son to lock the doors carefully because they were about to return. Hao Yan perched on the sofa, answering the phone with the obedient tone of an exemplary student to reassure his parents. The young man sprawled out on the couch, enjoying his 3-day holiday, thrilled that everyone was safe and that he was once again a vibrant 15-year-old. He summoned a glowing azure magic cube, his eyes sharp and calculating as he mentioned the name Star River, Demon God. Hao Yan scrutinized the treasure, confirming that this time reversal stone had not stripped him of his inherent overwhelming power. He groaned with pleasure, his face flushed with excitement as he realized he might be the only one possessing superpowers in this current world. His lecherous nature emerged, and he drooled as he imagined the fun mischief he could get up to with the beautiful Xiao Shui. Hao Yan opened the system interface from the cube, his demeanor as relaxed as a professional gamer checking his inventory after a battle. He scrolled through the treasure trove of items obtained from the God-tier dungeon, regretting that this pile of overwhelming currency and materials was now nothing more than trash in a normal world. Nevertheless, Hao Yan decided to keep everything as a memento, a nostalgic half-smile gracing the face of one who had once stood at the pinnacle of power. The doorbell chimed, interrupting his thoughts, signaling an uninvited guest disturbing his rest. He slowly walked to the door with a nonchalant expression, and upon hearing the urgent calls from outside, he immediately knew something was up. As soon as the door opened, Huo Xin burst in like a whirlwind, urgently telling him to turn on the computer with an extremely hurried expression. His red-haired best friend rushed straight into the bedroom as if their base was under attack, frantically asking if Hao Yan knew what the hell was going on online. Huo Xin snatched the mouse, clicking frantically, his mouth incessantly babbling about how the internet was exploding with unbelievable, shocking news. The image of the legendary old man appeared on the screen, and Huo Xin pointed at it, praising the character's coolness profusely, while Hao Yan feigned ignorance and asked what was happening. Hao Yan's eyes widened to their fullest, his pupils contracting in shock as he realized that his own reflection in his Slayer form had been captured by cameras and uploaded online. The phone screen clearly displayed the moment Slayer sat atop a mountain of monster corpses, accompanied by a sensational headline about the mysterious old man single-handedly clearing the entire map. Hao Yan covered his face in helplessness, breaking out in a cold sweat as he realized his glorious feat had been recorded and broadcast for the entire world to see. Huo Xin was utterly thrilled, his eyes shining like stars, as he declared that the entire internet was buzzing, trying to uncover the identity of the anonymous master. The black-haired youth forced a laugh, sweat pouring down him as he concocted a ridiculous excuse that he thought it was just a normal gas pipeline explosion that day. His best friend grabbed Hao Yan's collar and shook him wildly, making him feel like his soul was about to leave his body, constantly asking if he understood the gravity of the situation. Huo Xin pointed decisively at the sky, painting a vision of superheroes in tight suits flying around, and firmly asserting that superpowers existed in this world. His red-haired friend suddenly narrowed his eyes suspiciously, wondering why a supernatural enthusiast like Hao Yan was so calm today, in the face of such shocking news. Hao Yan quickly waved his hands, denying everything, stammering that he was just too shocked to process the information yet. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy as Huo Xin slumped into a chair, casually asking what superpower Hao Yan would choose if he possessed one. Hao Yan offered a subtle, knowing smile, calmly replying that he had never dreamed of such absurd, unreal things. Huo Xin sneered, mocking his best friend Hao Yan's drooling, lecherous face as he indulged in wild fantasies. It turned out the youth Hao Yan's mind was full of dirty thoughts. He had a nosebleed as he dreamed of the power of time stop to do shady things with pretty girls. Hao Yan's face darkened, his eyes as sharp as knives as he realized that the upcoming events matched his old memories. Huo Xin put an arm around his shoulder, asserting that he would fully support Hao Yan in winning over Yingying, declaring himself ready to risk his life for his brother. His best friend confidently thumped his chest, inviting Hao Yan to witness his performance of a lifetime at next Friday's spring picnic. The two words picnic struck Hao Yan like lightning, making his pupils contract as memories of the terrifying starfish monster flooded back to haunt him. The image of Huo Xin spitting blood, collapsing in despair, appeared vividly red and sharp in his mind, as if it had just happened. The chaotic scene of Hao Yan screaming in helplessness, trying to shield Yingying, who was crying desperately amidst the embrace of death. Hao Yan closed his eyes to calm himself, swearing internally that that bloody tragedy would be buried forever and never repeat. Pushing aside the painful past, Hao Yan flashed a mischievous smile and fist-bumped Huo Xin, joking that he didn't want to be beaten to death by Yingying. The bus carrying the entire class rolled towards the resort nestled amidst majestic mountains, signaling the start of a fated journey. The teacher herded the classmates off the bus, ordered them to check in, and declared the rest of the day free time to relax. He finalized the schedule for group activities at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow, and the classmates below nodded rapidly to get it over with. Hao Yan pulled his suitcase into the luxurious resort grounds, while his friends around him began to disperse, exploring the entertainment spots. Huo Xin walked along, teasing about Yingying's prolonged anger, suspecting his best friend had done something improper to be ignored by a girl for so long. Hao Yan swiped his card to open the door, then turned back to scold his friend to stop thinking dark thoughts and save some brain wrinkles for useful things. His best friend grinned happily, then leaped onto the bed, sprawling out and taking up all the space like an overgrown child. Huo Xin pointed suggestively at the black suitcase, teasing that he knew all about the secret stash Hao Yan usually hid under the mattress. Hao Yan froze, his face bewildered, his mind racing as he wondered what on earth his past self had hidden there that he couldn't remember. He was utterly shocked to see a pile of banned adult magazines, while the imaginary Xiao Shui looked at him with extreme contempt. Huo Xin lay sprawled on the bed with a bored expression, rambling philosophical thoughts about enjoying life before turning into office robots fueled by rice. Hao Yan held 2 tea jars in his hands with a knowing smile, retorting that merely surviving into adulthood was already a luxurious kind of luck. He skillfully filled the kettle with water at the sink, his demeanor calm and slow, exactly like a genuine old man in a young man's body. The gurgling sound of boiling water echoed from the induction stove, signaling the start of the serious youth's health-preserving tea time amidst the party atmosphere. Hao Yan sat cross-legged on the chair, elegantly raising a hot cup of tea, leisurely suggesting they invite Yingying to go mountain climbing with the group later. Huoxin, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, suddenly became serious, letting out a long sigh and saying there was an important matter he needed to explain to his friend. Seeing Hao Yan's bewildered expression, his best friend bluntly stated that, lately, his way of speaking and behaving reeked of an old man. Huoxin delivered another critical blow by comparing his aura to that of the famous superpower old man currently trending on social media. Hao Yan froze for 5 seconds after hearing that, as if struck by lightning, cold sweat pouring down him, as he thought his identity as the regressor had been exposed by his best friend. It turned out Huoxin had veered off into dirty talk, guessing that Hao Yan's little brother was weak, which was why he was so melancholic and unsuccessful with pretty girls. Hao Yan strained his neck, asserting that his little brother was still reliable and fully equipped, while boasting about his tireless, ox-like work ethic, regardless of the hour. Huoxin suddenly had an idea. He dove into the luggage, rummaging through it, sending clothes flying everywhere like a battlefield in search of aid. His best friend grinned sinisterly as if he had just looted a golden item, his face triumphant as he held up the treasure he had found. He shoved a bottle of kidney-strengthening and virility-boosting medicine right into Hao Yan's face, teasing that just eating goji berries wouldn't be enough to revive his masculine prowess. A knock-knock sound echoed, interrupting the sexology consultation, as a familiar voice from outside urged the two dawdling young men to hurry and get ready. Huoxin grinned widely, taking the opportunity to jab that Yingying couldn't bear the longing and had to come all the way to their room to find them herself. The hotel room door slowly creaked open, the atmosphere tense as they awaited the arrival of the uninvited guest. Yingying appeared in an extremely fiery climbing outfit that fully showcased her curves, hands on her hips as she yelled at the two men to quickly get their butts out. Seeing her irritable attitude, Huoxin seized the chance to tease that the two of them were perfectly in sync, just like a grumpy old married couple. Yingying flared up, wanting to burn that glib-tongued guy alive, while Huoxin stubbornly insisted that it was only a matter of time before they became a couple. Hao Yan stepped out the door with sky-high confidence, boldly declaring that he was ready to depart at any moment. He leaned his face close to Yingying, asking if she was ready, making her blush furiously due to the extremely close proximity. Hao Yan's eyes suddenly widened completely, his pupils contracting as if he had just discovered an important target that needed urgent assessment. Without a word, he squatted down right in front of the young lady to scrutinize her thoroughly, claiming he needed to confirm some information. Huoxin stood behind him, giving a thumbs up, praising his friend as a true player, while Hao Yan was disappointed that girls nowadays didn't wear sturdy protective shorts like in his time. Yingying froze for a few seconds, her face burning red as she realized this pervert had just openly peeked under her skirt. A thunderous slap was delivered, accompanied by a piercing scream, sending the pervert Hao Yan flying straight to hell. Hao Yan regretted too late as he flew through the air, realizing his old man's prying instinct had harmed him, especially since that skirt was excessively short. The young man sat on the ground, clutching his swollen cheek and protesting his innocence, while Yingying turned her face away with extreme sulkiness and disdain. Huoxin seized the opportunity to laugh at the victim, advising him to stop trying to act innocent and embrace his true perverted nature with his bros. Hao Yan clutched his swollen red cheek, bitterly recalling his glorious golden age, when he was a legend revered by all. On the mountain path, Huoxin wondered if girls this age held grudges for long, while Yingying, walking ahead, was still fuming over the peeking incident. The young man, Hao Yan, closed his eyes with a sigh, criticizing today's youth for being too conservative, choosing blue and white striped underwear instead of heavy-duty protective gear like in his time. In his mind, images of the hot fantasy girls from back then appeared, wearing daring, scantily clad outfits, making this old man blush furiously with excitement. Huoxin slapped his friend's chest to pull him back to reality, urging him to quickly figure out how to appease that fiery shrew before the atmosphere became suffocating. Hao Yan let out a long sigh, his face full of resignation as he realized this ordeal wouldn't be easy to overcome with the pervert label he had just been given. He hurriedly ran after the blonde girls retreating back, calling out Yingying's name loudly, hoping to clear his name. Yingying blushed and turned away, puffing out her cheeks in annoyance and letting out a cold huff, ignoring the panicked, sweating face of the pervert behind her. She sped up and ran away, shouting for him not to follow, while Hao Yan desperately raised his hand, begging for a chance to explain this disastrous misunderstanding. Yingying covered her ears, childishly fleeing reality, completely oblivious to the troublesome rock lying squarely in front of her toes. Yingying's foot kicked hard against the annoying rock lying in the middle of the road, creating a dull thud that signaled an ominous sign. She lost her balance and lunged forward, sending her hat flying, while Hao Yan, behind her, frantically shouted a warning. Just as she was about to kiss the ground, Hao Yan activated his god-tier speed, gliding forward like a gust of wind to execute a spectacular save. His firm hand swiftly caught her slender waist, precisely halting her fall. Hao Yan performed a textbook princess carry, making Huo Xin freeze with his mouth agape, as if watching a real-life superhero movie. He flashed a charming smile and asked about her condition, making Yingying blush furiously due to the overly intimate proximity. Yingying struggled free and pointed into the distance, unable to believe he had just performed a physics-defying jump from over there to here in the blink of an eye. She stood awkwardly on one leg, muttering her thanks, while Hao Yan tried to act as if nothing had happened. Huo Xin repeatedly questioned him about his Olympic-level long jump ability, forcing Hao Yan to sweat and bluff about the explosion of human potential to cover it up. Yingying's expression suddenly changed. She stared at him with sharp eyes, and then called out in a serious tone. Yingying abruptly pointed towards the edge of the forest, cutting through the awkward atmosphere to warn the two men about something unusual. Huo Xin grinned, asking her what was going on, while Hao Yan maintained a cool expression, observing the situation. A ghostly blue light suddenly flared up in the dense forest, making Yingying wonder in confusion what on earth it was. A spatial gate ripped open in the void, unleashing bolts of thunderous energy, reeking of danger and death. Hao Yan's pupils contracted intensely, his face paling in horror as if he had just witnessed the apocalypse descending. He froze, stunned, realizing a dungeon gate was toweringly appearing right where it should have been peaceful and safe, throwing all his calculations into disarray. Hao Yan stood rooted to the spot, his mind in turmoil because he was certain he had already sealed those trash demons back to the other world. Pages of legend resurfaced in his memory, recalling the story of Earth's first hunter, whose overwhelming power once confronted demons. After the demon lord was defeated and sealed, spatial gates began to open, ushering in an era of humanity's insane power awakening. Hao Yan broke out in a cold sweat, panicking as he realized he was that legendary figure, and this bizarre loop still refused to let him go. Hao Yan clutched his head in panic, as if his brain was about to explode from the distorted memories, while Yingying worriedly touched his shoulder, asking what was wrong. Cold sweat streamed down his face. Hao Yan realized that damned gate before him signaled history repeating itself and social order about to be completely overturned. His eyes turned sharp again. He told himself he absolutely must not reveal himself as the one who initiated this era of chaos right now. While Huo Xin innocently speculated about an alien spatial gate, Hao Yan had already calculated his next move. He ordered Yingying to find the teacher to create a diversion, while he himself would venture alone into the tiger's den to assess the situation. Hao Yan pushed the two youngsters away, fabricating a story about his supreme escape skills to reassure his naive companions. He flashed a confident professional smile, joking about making some money so Yingying would feel at ease, leaving to stand guard outside. As soon as the figures of his two friends disappeared behind the trees, the smile on Hao Yan's lips vanished, replaced by a deadly coldness. Hao Yan stood towering before the spatial gate, which was unleashing a torrent of furious thunder energy, his coat fluttering, exuding the aura of a king. His eyes blazed with intense focus, ready to teach the monsters inside a lesson they would never forget about true power. Hao Yan tensed, releasing energy, golden lightning bolts tearing through space as he began his disguise process. A colossal pillar of energy shot straight up into the sky, signaling the birth of a legend amidst the night. The aftershocks from the transformation ravaged the surrounding ground, creating immense pressure right next to the spatial gate. A lit cigarette glowed red, emitting white smoke, the characteristic inseparable item of his new persona. Slayer officially appeared in the form of a muscular old man, clad in a cloak, looking weathered and domineering. Slayer's soul eye gleamed with a sharp gaze, his glowing red magic eye patch ready to illuminate every weakness of his enemies. Without a second's hesitation, Slayer plunged into the blue gate with the speed of a whirlwind. The timeline fast-forwarded 5 years, to when mysterious spatial gates began appearing atop the Egyptian pyramids. Dungeons sprouted like mushrooms after rain in historical landmarks such as Easter Island, spreading terror across the globe. At the ancient Stonehenge, another gate also formed, adhering to the world system's periodic refresh and reset rules. Energy from the dungeons gradually replaced traditional power sources, transforming the deadly caverns into golden energy mines for humanity. Inside the mine, a muscular purple giant used brute force to smash rocks, while the one in high-tech armor shot lasers, cutting minerals like cake. Slayer stood proudly with his white-haired partner, puffing on a cigarette as he observed the new social order he had helped create. Crowds jostled, forming a long queue before the entrance to the entrance exam registration, each person dreaming of becoming a top hunter. Yingying clenched her fists with determination, declaring she had to pass the academy entrance exam to meet her idol, Lord S, completely oblivious to the original standing right beside her. She hugged a book with Slayer's image, her eyes sparkling with adoration, while Hao Yan wore a world-weary expression, as if his idol self was so close yet so far. Lord S's reputation enveloped the entire city. Revered as the founding patriarch who established the first academy and guild for awakened individuals, Yingying was about to replay her idol-worshipping recording, and then stumbled into Hao Yan, making him realize her obsession was growing more severe. Hao Yan unceremoniously pushed her head away, cutting her off immediately, as his ears were already calloused from hearing others praise himself. Yingying sighed, comparing Hao Yan to her idol. She worried about him but was more concerned that Lord S had been out of sight lately. Hao Yan shrugged with a forced smile, planning to make his escape by claiming his abilities were too useless, and that taking the exam would only waste time, so he should just attend a regular school. Yingying flared up, hands on her hips, dismissing his feigned inferiority and asserting that his abilities were unique. With a bit of smooth talking, the judges would snap him up immediately. Realizing things weren't going his way, Hao Yan broke out in a cold sweat and continued to make excuses, citing social anxiety to shirk responsibility. Not letting him struggle, Yingying grabbed his shirt tightly and dragged him away, boldly declaring that she would explain everything to the judges on his behalf to speed things up. Ignoring Hao Yan, who lay flat on the floor like a sack, she continued to drag him inside, citing the reason of bringing honor to the family, even though the poor guy couldn't even remember his great-grandfather's name. In his mind, a beautiful vision of a normal student life appeared, where he could sleep with his eyes wide open during math class without a single worry. It was a far cry from the nightmare of being a legend in his previous life, where he was buried under mountains of guild management paperwork to the point of mental exhaustion. Hao Yan's face was haggard, as if he had aged a decade from being cornered. He widened his eyes, considering whether to reveal the whole truth to be free of this burden. Yingying delivered a killer blow, leaning close to his ear and hinting at an incredibly tempting secret reward if he managed to pass the assessment exam. Blushing, she whispered, censored sweet nothings into his ear, completely freezing Hao Yan due to their unimaginable audacity. Young Hao Yan's brain immediately overloaded and emitted black smoke, his face flushed crimson with a dazed expression as he imagined the reward. Seeing that he had taken the bait, Yingying smiled triumphantly and asked for confirmation, while Hao Yan had already sprung to his feet, brimming with determination to fight to the death for a girl. He immediately yelled his agreement, giving a confident thumbs up, betraying his integrity and principles faster than an ex-lover could turn their back. The scene shifted to a steamy bath, where Yingying fully displayed her youthful beauty along with the information about her newly awakened trapper ability. She emerged with only a towel loosely wrapped around her, drinking milk, while demonstrating the spectacular transformation of her fully developed figure after 5 years. Yingying casually plopped onto the sofa, complaining about the heat and demanding the air conditioner be turned on, making Hao Yan, who sat beside her, break out in a cold sweat trying to keep his cool amidst the blossoming scene. Ever since awakening her ability, she seemed to have also unlocked a deadly charm, wearing revealing outfits that burned the eyes of onlookers. Hao Yan's face turned beet red as he desperately tried to salvage his last shred of male dignity against her dangerously close approach. It turned out Yingying was just trolling him hard by asking for the air conditioner remote, leaving the stoic young man so disappointed he was speechless. He clutched his head, screaming in despair, as he recalled the source of the tragedy that forced him to live with this shrew. Memories flooded back of his eccentric parents announcing their world tour, leaving their bewildered son staring through the car window. His father added the final blow, stating that from now on, Yingying would be his guardian, then stepped on the gas and sped away, without a trace of reluctance. Back in the present, the duo was dressed for battle, heading to the main hall. Yingying boldly requested 2 registration slots. The purple-haired receptionist with a fiery figure adjusted her glasses, professionally asking both of them to input their information into the system. Her fingers swiftly glided across the touchscreen to complete the identity verification and signature procedures for both of them. The receptionist finalized the entrance exam date for 2 months later. Yingying excitedly accepted the challenge while Hao Yan stood behind her with a resigned expression. The purple-haired receptionist unveiled an exclusive item, a chibi model of Lord S to entice applicants to register. Hao Yan froze, seeing his own bewildered face being made fun of. In his mind, he screamed for a pay cut for whoever approved this monstrous idea. Yingying squealed with delight, hugging the doll tightly as if she had found gold, completely ignoring the original owner who was utterly stunned behind her. Holding the miniature replica in his hand, Hao Yan bitterly wondered why he felt like he was being cuckolded by this inanimate figure of himself. The scene shifted to the towering guild building, where the big shots of the hunter world gathered. The powerful click-clack of high heels echoed on the floor, heading towards the desk where someone was dozing off. Fu Ning slammed a stack of reports onto the desk, forcing Lord S to wake up and deal with the mess from the A-rank dungeons. The old legend coughed violently, breaking out in a cold sweat as the alluring secretary pushed a tight deadline on him. Lord S trembled as he slumped into his chair, complaining to Fu Ning that he was on the verge of exhaustion. Fu Ning appeared with the demeanor of a boss, offering a box of kidney-tonifying supplements as a subtle yet profound reminder of her boss's age and health issues. Seeing Lord S dare to doze off during office hours, the secretary brandished a whip, ready to take drastic measures to discipline her staff. The old man sighed heavily, blaming his age as he recalled a past with few glorious achievements, but many instances of carrying shopping bags for pretty girls. Capitalizing on her boss's laziness, Fu Ning brazenly blackmailed him, demanding double her salary before she would lift a finger to clear the backlog of documents. She pushed up her glasses with a calculating look, flashing a sly smile that challenged the old man to refuse her tempting offer. Lord S broke out in a cold sweat, yelling that his employee, who earned hundreds of thousands of coins each month, actually possessed a superpower for draining money, not for management at all. Ignoring her superior's indignation, Fu Ning coldly delivered a psychological blow, calculating precisely that he would lose over 17 days of hard work if he didn't cough up the money. With the deadline breathing down his neck, the renowned legend had no choice but to swallow his tears and surrender, gritting his teeth as he approved the raise in utter helplessness. Her gold-digging plan a resounding success, the alluring secretary smirked triumphantly, adjusting her choker with the satisfaction of a victor. Activating enhanced cognition, Fu Ning transformed into a deadline meeting machine, surrounded by numerous blue data screens. With supreme information processing speed, she cleared the scattered pile of messy documents as swiftly as a whirlwind. In just a blink, the towering stack of files was perfectly organized, saving her boss a precious full minute. Pushing up her glasses with confidence, Fu Ning didn't forget to subtly remind her boss about a raise befitting her superhuman game-hacking ability. Lord S broke out in a cold sweat, asking her to draft reports, secretly wishing he could copy this formidable skill to avoid being drained of money by his employee every day. Having settled the salary matter, the secretary turned to finalize the schedule for attending the Academy's opening ceremony on the 31st of next month. Fu Ning began her lecture, recalling last year's tardiness scandal, and demanding that the idol of the new world maintain a proper image. Annoyed to the point of a headache by the nagging, the old man waved his hands frantically, begging for mercy, telling her to stop prattling like an old woman and let him breathe for a moment. Unable to bear the pressure, Lord S had to make an excuse about urgent private matters to temporarily escape the strict control of his unusual secretary. He had barely taken a few steps out the door when the communication device on the old man's wrist vibrated violently, signaling impending trouble. The holographic screen displayed the name Yingying. This girl truly had a sixth sense. Her timing was impeccable. On the other end, Yingying, brandishing a carrot knife with murderous intent, fiercely questioned why he dared to answer the phone as slowly as a snail. Hao Yan broke out in a cold sweat, hastily fabricating a story about playing a virtual reality escape game with friends to cover up his flustered tone. She temporarily forgave him, but didn't forget to criticize his baggy clothes, then finalized plans for Hot Pot tonight, leaving him only able to meekly agree to get past the conversation. After hanging up, Hao Yan sighed in relief as if he had just escaped a calamity, profuse sweat pouring down and drenching his forehead. He imagined confessing his true identity as Hao Yan to her, but shivered at the awkwardness and sheer cringeworthiness of this bizarre situation. Even though he was run ragged to the point of losing all dignity as a legend, thinking of Yingying still alive and well in this life, he smiled contentedly and accepted his fate. Time flew by, and the entrance exam day for the first Awakening Academy of the new era finally arrived under the blazing sun. The academy gates stood majestically, welcoming a massive influx of new students, promising a fierce admissions season. Yingying was dressed stunningly in a white halter top that fully showcased her curves. She raised a hand to shield her eyes from the sun, marveling at the overwhelming number of candidates compared to last year. Hao Yan, in his smart white uniform, walked along, lecturing about the academy's reputation, and casually reminded his clumsy friend to watch out for passers-by. Karma struck immediately. Yingying lost her balance and crashed into Glasses Boy, causing both to almost fall to the ground with a sharp collision sound. The unfamiliar boy stammered out apologies, his head spinning, but still tried to maintain minimal politeness in front of the beautiful girl. Profuse sweat poured down the boy's face. He stammered that he was fine, his expression extremely tense as if he were being interrogated. The very next second, the young man activated his disappearing act, running off like the wind, leaving Yingying completely stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. She turned to Hao Yan, and smugly concluded that the guy definitely suffered from late-stage social anxiety disorder. No doubt about it. Hao Yan wasn't interested in her casual psychological analyses. He pushed her to go grab a spot first, while he made an excuse to go to the restroom to make a quick escape. The vast examination hall was packed, its solemn atmosphere signaling that the critical hour was approaching. Yingying's face was scrunched up like a monkey eating a chili, constantly looking around for Hao Yan, while Huo Xin behind her still grinned as if nothing was amiss. A hand holding a microphone appeared with extreme decisiveness, ready to speak and quell the noisy crowd. Fu Ning stepped out with the aura of a leader, announcing loudly that the orientation would begin in 1 minute, and requesting everyone to take their seats. Yingying broke out in a cold sweat, fearing that Hao Yan would be late and leave a terrible impression on the judges on the very first day. Backstage, Fu Ning glanced at Slayer, who had just appeared, complimenting him on his punctuality but with a suspicious look, asking why he was drenched, as if he'd just emerged from water. Slayer forced a smile, making up an excuse about wearing too many layers, but in reality, he had just speed-changed in the restroom and then ran for his life to make it on time for the show. Fu Ning adjusted her glasses, complimenting his new outfit as cool, but didn't forget to order him to get his butt on stage immediately. The VIP guests, including influential figures from other races, applauded enthusiastically, welcoming the appearance of the living legend. Slayer stepped into the spotlight with his signature smile, holding the mic and greeting the crowd with the domineering demeanor of a true master. Slayer broke out in a cold sweat when he saw Yingying excitedly waving at him from the audience seats. The fangirl clasped her hands, praying for her idol to bless Hao Yan with a good performance, and also dreamed of getting 100 autographs as a souvenir. Slayer froze for 5 seconds, sweat pouring like a stream, as the presence of an acquaintance panicked him so much that he completely forgot his speech script. Fu Ning stood backstage with a questioning look, suspecting that this old man was acting up again, forgetting his lines at a crucial moment. Instead of speaking, he lifted his head and let out a long sigh to regain his composure. He yelled a curt and brief, "Good luck with the exam," into the microphone, then immediately declared his task finished. The entire vast hall fell into absolute silence at the legend's utterly disastrous speech. Fu Ning rubbed her forehead in helplessness, admitting that her intuition about this old man's comedic antics had never been wrong. Unexpectedly, a round of crisp applause broke the awkward atmosphere. The VIP guests vied to praise his conciseness as the pinnacle of style, asserting that silence was the true mark of a master. Fu Ning pushed up her glasses in helplessness, reluctantly clicking her tongue and accepting this comedic outcome to get it over with, as there was no other way. A full view of the vast examination hall, with piles of candidates queuing up, waiting for their turn to be tested in the high-tech competition area. Yingying furiously grabbed Hao Yan by the collar, interrogating him for disappearing, making him break out in a cold sweat as he quickly made up an excuse about needing to relieve himself to cover it up. She was excited to learn they had consecutive registration numbers, and immediately pressured him to show off his legendary 5-meter jump to impress everyone. The server system called out registration numbers 121 and 122 to the scanning platform to measure their character stats. Yingying smiled brightly like a flower, urging Hao Yan to quickly get on the platform to show off his team-carrying skills. The exam proctor held a tablet, instructing the two young people to stand on the launch pad, asking them to relax their bodies and look straight ahead for the scanner to operate smoothly. A pair of sneakers stepped onto the platform, and the system began activating the strength index testing procedure. A blue light enveloped Yingying as the testing process began, and she stood proudly, awaiting the system's verdict. The exam proctor looked at the data on the screen and loudly announced that Yingying had reached a 3-star intermediate awakening level, a rather reputable start. Yingying was ecstatic upon receiving the 3-star intermediate assessment result, raising her fist to the sky, celebrating her victory with pride. The exam proctor nodded in congratulations, then escorted her off the stage to make way for the next candidate to face their heart-pounding moment. Hao Yan stood on the platform, whistling nonchalantly, ignoring the screen displaying no response, which made the exam proctor freeze for a few seconds. The exam proctor sternly announced that no awakening ability was found, and advised him to give up, which was exactly what the cunning young man wanted to quietly slip away. He put on a mocking face, gleefully suggesting that the exam proctor just disqualify him immediately to save the trouble of tiring back-and-forth theatrics. Yingying frantically rushed in, grabbing Hao Yan's shirt and pulling him away, hastily bluffing to the exam proctor that he possessed the copy ability to salvage the awkward situation. The exam proctor believed her completely, giving a thumbs up and praising the copy ability as rare, even though the measurement results suspiciously indicated he was a low-level 3-star. Hao Yan forced a smile, thanked them, then turned away with a long sigh, breaking out in a cold sweat because he was almost kicked out of the competition in an undesirable way. A boy with headphones silently walked down the stairs while the students next to him pointed and mocked him as the one-star good-for-nothing younger brother of the genius Li Kexin. Hao Yan observed and frowned upon hearing the concept of a bottom-tier class, secretly thinking he would have to tell Fu Ning to investigate, as he had never established such a garbage classification system. Yingying and Hao Yan actively approached the boy with headphones, who was trudging along alone. She waved a friendly greeting as if they had known each other for a long time. She recognized her classmate, smiling and striking up a conversation while Wang Zi looked bewildered, not understanding what was happening. Yingying excitedly boasted that his registration number 123 would likely put him in the same exam room as their group, trying to create a positive atmosphere. Wang Zi hung his head, full of self-reproach, sweating profusely as he feared failure would tarnish his genius older sister's reputation. He declared himself a one-star good-for-nothing with no future, intending to give up everything before the game even began. Despite Yingying and Hao Yan standing there, Hao Yan patted his good friend on the shoulder, reassuring him and suggesting a special recruitment path if he had other talents besides just punching and kicking. Yingying immediately pointed at Hao Yan as a vivid example, exposing him as someone with no stars, yet still strutting around like a general in this place. Wang Zi stared wide-eyed at the man in front of him, unable to believe that someone seemingly incompetent could stand there with such confidence. Hao Yan smirked mysteriously, continuing to play up the fake copy ability script to fool everyone and boost the boy's morale. The cheerful atmosphere was disrupted by the trio of bullies, who mocked Wang Zi, telling him he should go cling to his sister's skirts instead of making a fool of himself in the exam. Yangwei sneered contemptuously, mocking that the eldest daughter of the Li family would never care about a good-for-nothing younger brother like Wang Zi, who disgraced their family. Wang Zi's face went pale, sweat pouring like rain, as he trembled and explained that he had never offended Yangwei. Yangwei tightly grabbed Wang Zi's collar, arrogantly forcing the boy to speak up, while the victim could only stammer pleas for release in despair. Yingying didn't say much, unleashing a lightning kick that sent Yangwei flying into the display screen, making him see stars. Yangwei flew freely like a kite with a broken string, while his two subordinates frantically rushed to catch their boss before he landed face first. As soon as he was helped up, Yangwei yelled threats, bringing up his family background to demand Yingying's expulsion from the academy for daring to lay a hand on him. Yingying didn't flinch at the threat, glaring back and asking what right Yangwei had to make such a fuss. Hao Yan smirked arrogantly, interjecting into the fun with a sarcastic question about the opponent's family background. He stood proudly, declaring that he had heard of the Yang family, which even made Yingying beside him gasp in surprise at this sudden display of knowledge. When Yangwei pointed and threatened him to know his place, Hao Yan calmly retorted that he was just an ordinary candidate taking the exam, yet his aura was completely overwhelming. Yangwei flashed a sinister smile with bloodshot eyes, plotting a cruel revenge scheme for the upcoming exam room. He brushed past Hao Yan, leaning in to whisper a declaration of war, promising to settle their scores in the competition hall. Wang Zi trembled uncontrollably, watching the enemies retreating back, blaming himself for dragging everyone into this mess, fearing that Yangwei would exact cruel revenge. Yingying clenched her fists, her neck veins bulging as she boldly declared that she wasn't afraid of anyone, telling them to just wait for the exam to see who would truly be scared. Hao Yan reassured his teammate with a nonchalant attitude, considering Yangwei nothing more than roadside trash, not worth bothering with or fearing. The four-eyed boy broke out in a cold sweat, listing the Yang family's formidable background and their power within the school board to warn of the risk of being bullied to death. Hao Yan brushed aside all unnecessary worries, urging the group to pull themselves together and prepare for the important exam instead of being overly fearful. Hao Yan's gaze turned sharp as he repeated the Yang family name. It seemed he had marked his enemies for elimination. The colossal labyrinth gate loomed majestically under the sun, presenting a life-or-death challenge that forced contestants to escape within 30 minutes if they didn't want to be eliminated. The exam proctor explained the brutal rules regarding the deadly traps inside, and began a 5-second countdown to send the contestants into the crucible. Yingying turned back to confront Hao Yan, right at the labyrinth entrance, warning him not to get in her way during this crucial battle. While Yingying was brimming with enthusiasm, wishing good luck, Li Keta trembled, promising to do his best in a weak, anxious voice. As the countdown ended, Hao Yan stepped into the labyrinth's illuminated zone with the demeanor of a king, his eyes sharp and full of confidence. His footsteps echoed firmly on the stone floor, signaling an overwhelming display of skill was about to begin. He strolled leisurely as if shopping, confidently declaring himself the creator of this labyrinth and fully capable of clearing it in 5 minutes using a shortcut. However, Hao Yan flashed a cunning smile, curious to see how Yingying would manage with the deadly traps he had designed. He decided to stall for time to hide his true abilities, as clearing the map too quickly would reveal a skill level inconsistent with his current rookie facade. Hao Yan lowered his center of gravity, ready to spring into action and begin his calculated performance. Elsewhere, Yingying skipped along, humming a cheerful tune, completely unaware of a monster lurking in the shadows. Hao Yan watched from cover, speechless and sweating profusely at his teammates' carefree and unguarded attitude towards this difficult challenge. Suddenly, a colossal shadow fell from the sky, intending to ambush a bewildered Yingying. The monster landed with a thunderous crash, kicking up a cloud of dust, but Yingying managed to leap back and narrowly dodge the attack. It turned out to be a 2-star mimicry demon activating strength enhancement, baring its fangs and claws to threaten its small prey. Contrary to a panicked appearance, Yingying smirked cunningly and whispered, activating decoy trap. She stomped her heel on the ground, activating a skill that created a brilliant purple light directly beneath the monster's feet. Yingying struck a provocative pose, scoffing that this nameless nobody was too young to mess with her. The monster was enraged, roaring furiously and swinging its claws, lunging to tear apart the arrogant challenger. It mocked Yingying as a predictable fool upon seeing her stand still against the wall, then charged straight in like a runaway tank. But life isn't a dream. Its colossal foot landed precisely in the center of the purple magic circle on the floor. Yingying casually walked away, explaining that strength-type monsters were usually simple-minded and easily provoked, leaving the monster rigidly bound by the immobilization circle. Hao Yan looked down from above with a bored expression, assessing Yingying as an excellent student but finding her combat style too conventional and dull. A colossal water pillar suddenly erupted skyward with a loud explosion, causing the entire area to shake violently. Yingying frantically realized it was Li Keida's direction and immediately rushed to help, while Hao Yan remained calmly perched on the wall, observing. Hao Yan gave a helpless smile, sighing that this girl truly suffered from a severe hero complex. She couldn't help but meddle whenever she saw injustice. At the scene, Li Keida was slammed into a wall by an extremely powerful water element attack with a painful thud, water splashing everywhere. The bespectacled youth cowered, enduring continuous sharp jets of water, but the bully showed no signs of letting up. Ouyang Wei manipulated water orbs in his hands, sneering and wondering why his prey's reinforcements still hadn't appeared. Despite his injuries, Li Keida tried to shout an explanation that they were just strangers passing by, so Ouyang Wei wouldn't trouble innocent people. Ouyang Wei's eyes widened in fury. He roared, believing Li Keida was underestimating his intelligence with that clumsy lie. Li Keida staggered to his feet and pointed directly at the bully, exposing the truth that Ouyang Wei's punishment by his older sister was entirely deserved for what he had done. Ouyang Wei sneered, flaunting his family background and delivering a fatal psychological blow, claiming even his older sister despised this useless younger brother. He gave a contemptuous thumbs down, trampling his opponent's self-esteem with the most venomous words about failure and family disgrace. Li Keida's mind was plunged into darkness by thousands of scrutinizing eyes, tormenting him that he was merely worthless trash, a backdrop for his genius older sister. Unable to bear the immense mental pressure, Li Keida's legs gave out, causing him to collapse to the floor with a desperate thud. The poor student clutched his head, retreating into silence, completely mute and accepting his fate of being trampled by the strong. Ouyang Wei summoned a water orb in his hand, cackling as he threatened to permanently kick this trash out of class because he found him irritating. Yingying suddenly appeared with the aura of a big sister, splashing cold water on the spoiled brat's face, saying his power was nothing but luck. Stung. Ouyang Wei's eyes bulged as he furiously spouted sick theories about superior dominant genes having the right to eliminate weak recessive genes. Ignoring his nonsense, Yingying bent down to pull Li Keida up and scoffed at the enemy's twisted ideology right in front of him. She gently supported her teammate's shoulder and asked about his well-being, making Li Keida blush furiously as he tried to compose himself after the shock. Yingying smiled confidently, reassuring Li Keida that he should focus on his exam, while she had more than enough power to pass this trial without anyone's help. She spun around to Ouyang Wei and unleashed venomous words, likening him to a cockroach, suggesting the academy should add a character test to filter out the trash. Hao Yan eavesdropped from behind the wall with an amused expression, scribbling notes and nodding in agreement with the idea of adding a character test to the exam. Called a pest, Wei's eyes flared with rage as he pointed directly at his opponent's face, roaring to ask who this girl was calling a cockroach. Hao Yan observed from a distance with sharp eyes, secretly admiring the sharp tongue of that distinctive blonde girl. A digital magic circle suddenly appeared on the ground with a buzzing sound, signaling that the monster summoning system had officially activated. A colossal mimicry demon lumbered into existence right behind Hao Yan, but he remained standing there with an oddly calm demeanor. The one-eyed monster roared and charged to attack, while Hao Yan simply adopted a relaxed stance, deciding to put on a bit of a show for this test. With just a simple yet terrifyingly powerful punch, Hao Yan delivered a devastating blow, creating a brilliant golden energy surge that sent the monster to the scoreboard. Hao Yan dusted off his hands and walked away as the monster's corpse dissolved into data, muttering that these mimicry demons moved too slowly and needed adjustments. Hao Yan coldly questioned Wei about daring to insult his friend Yingying earlier. The spoiled brat Wei sneered, scoffing that he wasn't afraid of being ganged up on and adopting an arrogant, challenging tone. The sneer on his face vanished as he sensed a high-speed surge of killing intent tearing through the air. Hao Yan glided forward like the wind, appearing directly in front of Wei, who flinched in startled panic, unable to react in time. Hao Yan's cold blue eyes fixed on his opponent, exuding an overwhelming aura that made the person opposite him shiver. Cold sweat streamed down Wei's forehead. He gritted his teeth and exclaimed in horror at his opponent's unbelievable speed. In the control room, Fu Ning sharply noticed the incident and ordered the technical staff to focus the image on camera number 004. She stood with her arms crossed, observing with a serious expression, while the exam proctor hastily carried out the command to zoom in on the image. The screen clearly displayed Hao Yan cornering Wei, leaving the arrogant youth with no escape. Without another word, Hao Yan raised his hand, intending to give the insolent brat a slap he'd never forget, making him fall backward in terror. Smack! A crisp, resounding crack echoed as Hao Yan flat-handedly slapped Wei across the face, accompanied by stern words of admonishment regarding the youth's disrespectful attitude. The heaven-shattering slap distorted Wei's face, spittle flying everywhere, witnessed by a stunned Likeda and Yingying behind him. Likeda was dumbfounded, while Yingying could only sigh exasperatedly, clutching her forehead as she recognized her old man's characteristic violent teaching methods. In the central control room, Fu Ning stood with her arms crossed, intently watching the live feed of the dramatic school violence. She gently pushed up her glasses, a smile full of hidden meaning and amusement gracing her lips as she sensed the strangely familiar fighting style from the new recruit. Wei clutched his swollen cheek, screaming in a frenzy, unable to believe that an unknown nobody dared to humiliate him in broad daylight. Blood rushed to his head. He furiously gathered energy in his hand, forming a deadly water orb, his face contorted like a demon as he lunged to take his opponent's life. Hao Yan tilted his body, dodging the attack as lightly as a feather, his cold blue eyes remaining calm as if playing with a naughty child. Without letting the kid recover, Hao Yan delivered another slap that made stars burst before his eyes, shattering both his opponent's technique and his insolent mouth against the wall. Wei took the full force of the excruciating blow, blood gushing from his nose, his eyes rolling back white from the immense physical shock that left him completely stunned. Wei knelt on one knee, his face twisted with resentment, his hand gathering blue energy as he swore to make his opponent pay dearly for this humiliation. He slammed his hand onto the ground, activating his water escape skill, creating violent ripples of water that spread out in preparation for an all-out counterattack. A colossal pillar of water erupted from the floor with a loud splash, forming a hydraulic wall that obscured vision to create a surprise advantage. From above, Wei plunged down like a mad beast, his bloodshot eyes filled with killing intent locked onto Hao Yan, who stood motionless below. He roared, "Die," in full fury, pouring all his strength into his water-clad fist, intending to crush the one who dared lecture him. Hao Yan reacted with lightning speed, unleashing a powerful hydraulic blast that shot back, flinging Wei far away like a ragged doll in midair. Hao Yan stood calmly in the center of the water escape circle, just like his opponent, simultaneously performing his skill and nonchalantly lecturing the kid about basic etiquette. The lecture concluded with a brutal high kick straight to the face, dislocating Wei's jaw, sending teeth, lips, and tears flying everywhere. The powerful kick slammed the young master into the ground, creating a deep crater, and a cloud of dust billowed up after the impact that shook the entire room. Likeda froze completely, sweat pouring down as he witnessed someone considered a good-for-nothing copy, a skill, and one-hit defeat an opponent in the blink of an eye. Yingying put her hands on her hips, her face scrunched up as she chastised Hao Yan for daring to steal all her glory right from under her nose. Hao Yan shot her a disdainful glance, directly telling the loudmouth girl that she needed to be re-educated because her snail-paced fighting style was an eyesore. He urged her on, as the exam was almost over, while also taking the opportunity to mock the good-for-nothing scanner that couldn't detect her hidden abilities. Li Keita frantically pointed at Ouyangwei's body lying on the floor, while Yingying casually asked how they should deal with this trash. She winked mischievously, declaring bluntly that they should just let the defeated general sleep soundly there and then dust off their hands and leave. Hao Yan sternly analyzed that Ouyangwei's defeat was well-deserved. With such a pathetic skill level, he would be wiped out by demons in an instant. Ignoring Li Keita, who was screaming in confusion, Hao Yan cruelly turned his back and walked away, considering the exam failure a favor to help that young master shed his delusions. The dominant duo strolled leisurely, leaving Li Keita to scramble after them, and Ouyangwei lying sprawled and alone on the cold floor. The bustling and magnificent scene outside the academy dormitory, where promising new students gathered after the fierce exam. Li Keita stood in his private room, his hand trembling as he held the card, his face blank with disbelief that someone as weak as him had actually passed the exam. Li Keita hesitated at the door, adjusting his glasses, still unable to believe that someone with his meager skills had actually been admitted to the prestigious academy. Hao Yan sat casually on the bed like a king. Seeing his roommate just standing there, he called him in to get him out of his sight. The four-eyed youth entered the room with a cheerful expression, holding his key card, his heart overjoyed to be sharing a room with a great master. Hao Yan lay relaxed, reminding him about next week's matriculation ceremony and casually asking about Li Keita's famous older sister, who would be giving a speech. While Hao Yan showered praise on Li Kexin as an outstanding graduating legend, Li Keita huddled in a corner, feeling inferior due to his sister's immense shadow. The young man forced a bitter smile, admitting that he was a useless good-for-nothing who couldn't possibly compare to his genius older sister. Hao Yan glanced over, seeing through his opponent's heart, his sharp, cold eyes flashing with a meaningful assessment. He lay with his hands behind his head, beginning to lecture him that everyone has their strengths, and while talent is important, diligent, hard work is the true path. He spoke of someone whose beginning was worse than pathetic, trembling even while holding a knife when surrounded by werewolves under the blood moon. But that very good-for-nothing later transformed into a war god, sweeping away hordes of void forerunners with his blade, making them vanish in an instant. Li Keita looked bewildered, asking about the strange name, which made Hao Yan realize with a start that he had accidentally mentioned a type of monster that didn't yet exist. Cold sweat poured down him. He panicked, realizing he had carelessly revealed information about high-level monsters that hadn't appeared in any dungeon yet. Quick as a flash, he pulled out his phone to cover his tracks, forcing a laugh and saying it was just the name of a boss in a mobile game he was grinding. Seeing Li Keita naively believe him completely and thank him profusely, Hao Yan could only give a wry smile, still sweating profusely from his spectacular deception. He breathed a sigh of relief, silently thanking the heavens that this four-eyed youth was simple-minded and not the type to overthink things. Using the excuse that he had to go to the airport to pick up his parents returning from an overseas trip, Hao Yan quickly changed and slipped out of the dormitory. On top of a skyscraper in the magnificent city, a pitch-black helicopter was landing on a brightly lit helipad. In his seasoned and authoritative slayer form, he strode with Fu Ning towards the helicopter, ignoring her grumbling. The tough old man with a long scar on his face exuded an overwhelming aura, coldly declaring that he would personally re-evaluate the results this time. Fu Ning announced that the evaluation result was A+, then quickly boarded the helicopter with the living legend and departed. As Fu Ning boarded the helicopter, she complained that all the 5-star experts were swamped, leaving only this old man with too much free time on his hands. Slayer sneered disdainfully, immediately exposing the real reason, that the stingy guild only wanted to save on hiring costs. Caught red-handed, the attractive secretary could only give a wry smile, then playfully admitted that the old man had seen right through her. Without further argument, Slayer abruptly stood up with the overwhelming presence of a superior, then ordered the flight crew to depart immediately. The roar of the engine echoed as the modern helicopter took off, leaving the dazzling city lights behind. Settling into his seat, Slayer boldly declared with a murderous expression that this time he would personally descend into the dungeon to participate in the battle. The atmosphere in the cockpit suddenly became awkward as the tough old man turned to stare intently at the beauty beside him with a scrutinizing gaze. Fu Ning blushed furiously, hastily covering her chest with her hands, then snapped, asking if the lecherous old man had seen enough. Slayer calmly and bluntly retorted that her mind was too dark, while he was merely calculating how long she would last in that damned dungeon. The helicopter gradually disappeared into the night sky, carrying Fu Ning's furious shouts as her pathetic survival skills were criticized. The magnificent scenery of a European-style city appeared under the dazzling sunlight, signaling the destination of this tumultuous journey. Slayer stealthily slipped into a hidden corner like a thief, whispering into his phone to explain his unusual absence. On the other end of the line, Yingying, in her spirit form, exposed his blatant lie about visiting relatives, making the old man sweat profusely, as he promised to return soon. While he was busy trying to cover his tracks, Fu Ning suddenly appeared right behind him, calling out his name, making Slayer jump as if caught cheating. Without a second's hesitation, his finger decisively pressed the end call button to destroy the evidence of his crime before he was exposed. At home, Yingying stared blankly at her phone screen, unable to believe that the kid had just hung up on her so cruelly. She gritted her teeth, her face flushed with anger as she recalled the strange woman's voice that had sounded just before the call was cut. Her jealousy erupted. Yingying took out her anger on the poor pillow, sending feathers flying everywhere, and swore she would teach him a lesson in manners. Back at the scene, Hao Yan sat on the ground, looking up, worriedly wondering how much of his secret this hot secretary, Fu Ning, had overheard. It turned out Fu Ning didn't care about his private life. She put her hands on her hips and scolded him fiercely for daring to disappear right before dungeon entry, calling it utterly unprofessional. Fu Ning poked the old man's forehead, sarcastically remarking that he should get his brain checked immediately for worrying signs of senility. The sudden close proximity made her ample bosom directly hit Hao Yan's eyes, startling him into exclaiming, "No way!" She pulled open his eyelids to check, then coolly declared that what he needed to worry about wasn't illness, but an arrest warrant for perversion, as his nosebleed began to gush. Fu Ning crossed her arms and looked at him with extreme contempt, as if he were trash, directly cursing the lecherous old man for having no shame. With a proud huff, she turned and walked away, ordering him to follow quickly for their mission. Hao Yan wiped away the nosebleed, bitterly blaming his weak, disloyal nose for not being able to handle a little stimulation, ruining his entire image. Regaining his composure, the two strode across the red carpet into the luxurious grand hall, where heavily armed soldiers were stationed. With his imposing stature in his Hao Yan form, he walked with an authoritative presence that completely dominated the surrounding atmosphere. A soldier immediately stood at attention, saluting in military fashion, and respectfully called out Lord S. right before the glowing purple teleportation gate. Hao Yan held his cigar, looking cool, waved his hand to dismiss the formalities, and instructed the soldiers to simply stand watch outside. No need for excessive fuss. Fu Ning wondered when she saw the old man standing tall before the glowing purple teleportation gate, questioning if he truly intended not to take her with him. Hao Yan turned to look at her with a sharp gaze through his lens, bluntly refusing, saying he was used to going solo. His cloaked figure stepped straight into the magical vortex, leaving the hot woman, Fu Ning, rooted to the spot, watching helplessly. He let himself free fall through the deep purple dimensional space with the whistling wind, thinking to himself that it was better to be alone than to let others be in danger because of him. Hao Yan landed in an extremely combat-ready superhero pose, exuding an overwhelming aura the moment he set foot in the new land. He stood proudly in the vast cave, a place the juniors called an instance dungeon, instead of the old-fashioned dungeon from back in the day. Memories flooded back, reminding him that these bizarre labyrinths had sprung up like mushrooms globally after he sealed the Demon Lord. This was a gathering place for all sorts of hideous monsters, from cyclops to terrifying giant earthworms, ready to make mincemeat of any civilians who dared to approach. The higher the danger, the greater the reward. Giant crystal blocks were always tempting bait, luring greedy hunters to their deaths. The thud of leather boots hitting the ground signaled that death had officially entered the monster's playground. Hao Yan emerged from a blinding light, his long shadow stretching across the cold tiled floor, as if announcing that death had officially paid a visit. He took a weathered puff from his cigar, then arrogantly challenged the lurking monsters. "Hey, come out and fight." In the darkness, the Rotac beast's glowing yellow eyes flared open with a sharp hiss, locking its target in a killer's gaze. A fierce whirlwind tore through the space, moving so fast that it left only faint afterimages in the air. He continued to walk calmly and gracefully, ignoring the pitch-black Rotac beast growling menacingly, blocking the glowing red gate. The Rotac beast revealed itself to be a high-level Rotac beast with a sharp horn. It roared furiously, activating its flame breath skill to incinerate its enemy. The old man squinted, assessing his prey, immediately recognizing it as a Doomweaver, a rather troublesome mid to high-level magic beast. He flew into a rage when he saw his precious leather jacket, a gift from Mary with a scorched hole in it, and immediately yelled out in regret and fury. His wrath exploded, He roared, "You're tired of living," and charged straight into the Rotac beast's maw with a destructive, lightning-clad blue fist. The punch, imbued with overwhelming power, blew the Rotac beast away in an instant, proving his level far surpassed ordinary 4-star standards. The Rotac beast let out an earth-shattering roar, its furious sound waves sweeping through the entire area as if to intimidate its opponent. Hao Yan grimaced and covered his ears, showing extreme annoyance at this noisy Rotac beast's mouth, as loud as a public loudspeaker. The old man sighed in exasperation, telling himself that this time he couldn't just one-shot it. He had to patiently write a detailed instruction manual for the guild. What a hassle. The Rotac beast's sharp claws tore through the air, lunging forward, but Hao Yan deftly dodged the attack, complaining that its speed was too fast for an introductory lesson. He switched to teacher mode, calmly floating in the air, jotting notes in his notebook while explaining this big cat's minion summoning technique. The Rotac beast became furious when its attack proved useless. It growled, then lunged its massive body at its enemy, intending to crush its prey. Hao Yan displayed supreme dodging skills, flipping backward to avoid a fatal slap, his hand still busily writing down data. A claw swipe tore through the ground with a loud crash, but all it hit was the afterimage of the old man who was practically cheating. He remained unfazed, clearly analyzing that after 3 summoning waves, the Rotac beast would go berserk and charge straight at its target to tear it apart. Just as predicted, the Rotac beast roared and spewed out a blazing pillar of fire, while Hao Yan smirked triumphantly, having completely anticipated its next move. The destructive pillar of fire tore through space, but for the seasoned Hao Yan, it was merely a flickering candle, which he gracefully leaned back to avoid with practiced ease. He sneered, coolly declaring that this foolish beast had made a fatal mistake by completely exposing its vulnerable back while engrossed in unleashing its attack. The Rotac beast poured all its strength into a futile attack on the rocks and ground, completely unaware that death had already slipped behind its rear. A black shadow flashed like lightning. Hao Yan had instantly teleported behind the Rotac beast's colossal heel at light speed, preparing for a legendary ambush. The old man gathered azure lightning energy at his clasped fingertips, proudly declaring an easy victory while hovering in midair. In a move that would make anyone cringe, Hao Yan unleashed his ultimate technique, 1,000 Years of Pain, thrusting a high-voltage electric current directly into the poor Rotac beast's undefended rear. The wolf howled a mournful cry that pierced the sky as it was electrocuted throughout its body, while the culprit stood blowing smoke from his fingertips, posing nonchalantly like a supermodel. His experienced hand clenched in the void, ending the novice tutorial with a clean, decisive finishing move, without a single wasted motion. Hao Yan picked up the cleanly severed head of the Rotac beast, watching its colossal body dissolve into countless golden experience data blocks, scattering down. With the spoils of war in hand, the old man grinned triumphantly, holding the glowing crystal, a fitting reward for this overwhelming practical lesson. Hao Yan stood proudly amidst a forest of colossal blue crystals, his coat flapping in the wind as he began to assess the terrain of this open-pit gold mine. With the mind of a shrewd merchant, he quickly calculated the abundant resources of the A+ ranked dungeon and the monster respawn cycle to optimize his money-grinding process. His capitalist blood surged. The old man's eyes gleamed with dollar signs as he dreamed of pocketing 50% of the profits and becoming a magnate once more. While he was busy counting money in his dream, a sharp whoosh tore through the air, interrupting the greedy one's thoughts of getting rich. The god-tier reflexes of a top-server gamer activated. Hao Yan tilted his body to dodge in an instant, letting Death's axe blade whiz past his silver beard. The fierce weapon embedded itself into the rock behind him, sending dust flying everywhere, while the target, having just landed, broke out in a cold sweat from the overly aggressive greeting. A massive dark shadow slowly emerged from the mist, exuding heavy pressure and a thick murderous aura, threatening the intruder. The disruptor revealed itself to be a ferocious troll demon with bulging muscles, wearing a necklace of skulls and possessing sharp fangs ready to crush its prey. Instead of fear, Hao Yan smirked defiantly, his eyes burning with fighting spirit, for he had finally encountered a challenge worthy of an A+ rank. Not letting him wait long, an entire troll demon army, wielding battle axes and iron shields, charged forward aggressively, turning the place into a bloody monster farming ground. The old man calmly pulled out his red notebook, muttering that such a large number was a bit tough and would require forming a team to handle smoothly. Still scribbling furiously in his manual, he assessed that these troll demons were actually quite weak, merely the original versions of the simulated monsters from the assessment exam. He stood proudly as if teaching a class, immediately pointing out the fatal weakness of these strength-type monsters, their extremely low IQ, and their susceptibility to provocation. A sharp glint of calculation flashed in his eyes. Hao Yan asserted that rushing into a one-on-one fight with these brutes was not the move of a strategic player. As he skillfully dodged attacks in mid-air, the eccentric old teacher muttered, hoping his beloved students had diligently studied the pile of lesson plans he had prepared. He unleashed a lightning-clad kick, sending an enemy flying, his mouth still rattling that this combat phase held no strategic value, so there was no need to take notes and waste ink. With a mountain-shattering punch directly to the monster's face, he sneered, declaring that today's practice would be the complete opposite of what the textbooks taught. 4 axe-wielding troll demons surrounded him from all sides, intending to overwhelm and crush the small prey trapped in the center of their deadly encirclement. Instead of panicking, Hao Yan smirked arrogantly, his remaining eye gleaming with extreme excitement at the prospect of unleashing his skills. Roar! He let out an earth-shattering roar, an explosive force sending the muscular monsters flying far away like tattered ragdolls. An earth-shattering explosion resounded, Hao Yan standing tall at the epicenter, while the immense shockwave from his roar swept away everything around him. A towering column of white smoke billowed upwards, the aftershocks of the attack blowing away the monsters like autumn leaves, clearing the map in an instant. Amidst the desolate scene, the tough old man calmly lit a cigar with a small flame from his fingertip, his cool demeanor unwavering. A battle completion notification appeared, Hao Yan, standing proudly, looking down at the lifeless monster corpse at his feet, with an impassive expression. He sat arrogantly, crossing his legs on a rock, his shoe sole directly on the severed skull of his enemy. Limbs scattered everywhere around him. The monster corpses began to decompose, transforming into red cubes before vanishing into thin air like deleted game data. Hao Yan reached out to touch the virtual system interface, displaying the number 15. Beginning to recalculate the dungeon's mechanics, he smirked triumphantly upon discovering that the monster refresh cycle was only 15 days. A lucrative opportunity for leveling up. Suddenly, a white-bearded troll demon, still clinging to life, raised its head, glaring at the one who had just massacred its kin with hatred. The monster trembled, pointing a finger at Hao Yan, who sat above, and uttered the words, demon, as if Hao Yan himself was the true final boss here. Hao Yan clenched the cigar in his mouth, his gaze sharp and cold as he looked down, not bothering to respond to the defeated foe's dying words. The troll demon used its last breath to roar with hatred, asserting that the demon lord would surely return for revenge. Under Hao Yan's calm gaze, the monster's corpse began to decompose into glowing red data blocks, before completely fading into nothingness. The helicopter sliced through the night sky, carrying the entire team to a safe retreat after thoroughly clearing the dungeon. Inside the cockpit, Fu Ning gleefully held a turquoise gemstone in her hand, beginning to inventory the massive pile of spoils they had just acquired. The secretary pushed up her glasses with a calculating look, excitedly envisioning the prospect of getting rid of troublesome investors thanks to the impending colossal sum of money. In contrast to his teammates' excitement, Hao Yan sat pensively, looking out the window with a heavy heart. The image of the monster roaring about the demon lord's return haunted his mind, clearly visible in the reflection on the window pane. Noticing the boss seemed unusually distracted, Fu Ning worriedly placed a hand on his shoulder, asking if anything was wrong after the hunt. Hao Yan flinched, breaking into a cold sweat, quickly forcing a laugh and brushing it off by saying he was just a little dizzy due to old age and weakness. Hao Yan squinted, staring intently at a sensitive spot, and Fu Ning immediately called him out on his lecherous grin, even as he claimed to be dizzy. The shameless old man even stuck out his tongue, making a pitiful face, begging her to let him enjoy himself a little before he kicked the bucket. Hearing Fu Ning demand double his salary to indulge him, Hao Yan immediately changed his tune and brutally pushed her head away. He widened his eyes and mouth, flailing like a leech on lime, scolding the secretary as a blatant robber for daring to demand such an exorbitant price. Hao Yan crossed his arms in a huff, criticizing the rude attitude of today's youth, while Fu Ning could only stand by, feeling aggrieved and helpless. After a long lecture on feminine virtues, the old man yawned widely, declaring he was going to sleep to avoid the responsibility of answering questions. Fu Ning clenched her fists in helplessness, forced to swallow her bitterness and comply with her difficult boss's unreasonable demands. The night sky was pitch black, with ominous clouds enveloping the silent space outside the window. The helicopter continued to cut through the wind into the night, the whirring of its rotor blades leaving faint trails of smoke. Feigning sleep, yet beneath his eye patch, Hao Yan was still racking his brain, pondering the cryptic dying words of the monster he had just defeated. Dark memories flooded back. Hao Yan recalled that in his previous life, the demon lord had only opened dungeons, but had never truly returned to wreak havoc, as was happening now. The old man raised a hand to his face, contemplating, feeling that the troll monster's dying words earlier were definitely an intentional warning signal. Looking at his aged reflection on the window pane, he questioned whether his own regression was the cause of the timeline being bent. Fu Ning stood beside him, narrowing her eyes suspiciously, wondering why her boss, who had just demanded to go to sleep, was now sitting deep in thought. Plotting. Hao Yan's remaining eye became sharp and resolute as he pieced together the events to reach a final conclusion. He clenched his fist with determination, declaring he would fight to the death against the Calamity Star, leaving his secretary Fu Ning bewildered and unsure of what was happening. The scene shifted to a spacious villa bathed in morning sunlight, where a piercing scream had just shattered the tranquility. In his youthful form, Hao Yan grimaced intensely as Yingying grabbed his ear, interrogating him about a mysterious phone call with a strange girl yesterday. The blonde girl pointed directly at his face with a fierce attitude, forcing her slippery boyfriend to immediately reveal the identity of that woman. Hao Yan rubbed his throbbing red ear, trying to appear innocent, and vehemently denying that she must have misheard. Hao Yan raised a hand to reassure his jealous girlfriend, while Yingying snorted coldly and reluctantly let the matter go, deeming him too naive to be involved in anything shady. Before he could even sigh in relief, Yingying pressed close to his face, pointing a finger at his chest to intensely interrogate him about his mysterious whereabouts for the past 2 days. The slippery Hao Yan winked confidently, having prepared his script, and grandly declared that his disappearance was to prepare a surprise gift. Yingying was dumbfounded by this sudden turn, her eyes wide as she asked what important day it was today that warranted a gift. He presented a small gift box, fabricating a cheesy reason about their 18th anniversary of meeting for the first time, then feigned deep hurt when she didn't remember anything. Unable to stand his dramatic act, Yingying blushed, brushed him off, and snatched the gift box to check what was inside. Her sapphire eyes lit up, sparkling like headlights as she saw the precious item inside. In Yingying's hand was a massive blue magic crystal. She gasped in astonishment, asking him where he had dug up such a hot item. While Hao Yan spun a tall tale about camping and hunting for items, his nose growing long like Pinocchio's, Yingying still doubted the source of the money, as the stone was worth 50,000 more coins. Hao Yan flashed a cunning, triumphant smile, his eyes glinting mischievously, knowing he had successfully diverted her attention. Hao Yan continued his dramatic act, painting a picture of himself working tirelessly as a delivery driver for years, saving every single coin just to buy the gift. He gestured with the rose in his hand, boasting that this was merely a paltry gold-tier item, and promising to grind hard to give her a much cooler purple-tier item after graduation. Yingying completely fell for his romantic trap. She cherished the gemstone in her hand and whispered her thanks, her eyes glistening with emotion. Seeing that she had taken the bait, Hao Yan immediately revealed his true colors as a sly merchant with a provocative expression, demanding she pay a small service fee for the gift. His perverted nature resurfaced. He clasped his hands in supplication and bluntly asked if she was wearing her strawberry-patterned underwear today. Yingying froze for a few seconds, her beautiful face flushing crimson, shocked by her pseudo-boyfriend's shameless and overly private question. Killing intent erupted furiously. Yingying transformed into a demon, roaring the full name Jin Wuyan. Unable to believe he had guessed her underwear secret perfectly, she unleashed a 1,000-pound punch, sending him to hell, distorting the slippery man's face and sending him flying in an instant. The scene shifted to a grand matriculation ceremony in a large auditorium, where a large crowd of future talents eagerly awaited. 2 male students in the crowd pointed upwards, excitedly discussing the appearance of a formidable senior who had just awakened a 5-star ability. A pair of long, slender legs strode through the audience seats, making the students below look up with eyes full of admiration mixed with curiosity. 2 gossiping students began to buzz about a female genius who had joined the guild in her 2nd year, comparing her vastly superior status to that of the new recruits. Li Kexin appeared with the dazzling aura of a 5-star awakener, confidently striding forward and calling out to her younger brother, Li Keita, who was hiding somewhere. Hao Yan and Yingying's group all froze as this powerful older sister approached the 4-eyed boy, creating an immense atmosphere of pressure. Seeing that the family needed private space to resolve their internal matters, Hao Yan waved a stylish goodbye and quickly pulled Yingying away to give them some space. Li Kexin watched Hao Yan's retreating back with a suspicious gaze, her intuition telling her that the young man's gait was suspiciously familiar. Turning back to her dejected younger brother, she tried to comfort him, but Li Keita could only bow his head, admitting his own weakness and inability to refute the gossip. Unwilling to accept such a defeatist attitude, Li Kexin grabbed her brother's shirt and sternly reminded him how excellent a scholar he had been before the world changed. She switched into national older sister mode, declaring firmly that even if Lee Keita failed in cultivation, there were still many other ways to succeed, and he would always be number one in her eyes. Lee Keita froze at his sister's sincere and powerful words of encouragement, his eyes flickering intensely as he realized he had always been absolutely protected. Lee Keita smiled in relief after his older sister had cleared his mind, feeling a bit of the psychological burden weighing him down lift. The scene shifted to a magnificent hall, where Hao Yan, having just appeared under the alias Jin Wu Yan, was immediately stopped by a group of people inquiring about his well-being. The leader was Ouyang Hao, the older brother of the defeated Ouyang Wei, who appeared with a menacing expression, demanding to settle the score for his brother being expelled from the academy. Yingying leaned back provocatively, pointing directly at Ouyang Hao and exposing his brother's bad habits of bullying others. Stung by a girl hitting a raw nerve, Ouyang Hao's face twisted in anger, veins bulging on his head as he roared a vulgar curse. Hao Yan stood opposite him with a stone-cold expression, while the pampered young master continued to ramble on about needing to teach him a lesson. Hao Yan's gaze was as sharp as a blade. Not only was he unafraid, but he also issued a concise command, ordering his opponent to apologize. Ouyang Hao laughed loudly, as if he had just heard a joke, then, relying on his numbers, ordered his lackeys to rush forward and teach the arrogant fellow a lesson he wouldn't forget. Yingying stood with her arms crossed, looking on with disdain, adding a fatal remark that someone defeated by a good-for-nothing was even more pathetic. A loud, sharp stomp echoed on the floor, signaling the end of the verbal sparring and the time for fists to speak. Ouyang Hao roared a vulgar curse and lunged at Yingying like an out-of-control wild beast. He unleashed a killer blow, accompanied by a gunpowder-laced threat that he would send his opponent to the scoreboard immediately. Ouyang Hao's kick tore through the air, but Hao Yan merely tilted his body slightly, elegantly dodging the attack. Miss. Hao Yan activated water magic around his finger, his eyes sharp as he warned that this was the second time he had been provoked. Water droplets quickly condensed into humanoid figures, emitting a chilling aura in the air, making the space seem to freeze. Ouyang Hao's eyes widened in horror, sweat pouring off him as he realized his brother's familiar skill was being wielded by his enemy. He stood frozen in a puddle of water, gritting his teeth, unable to accept his family's inherited skill being brazenly copied in front of his lackeys. Ouyang Hao stomped his foot into the water arrogantly, straining his neck to declare that even if copied, the original power of his skill was still on a different level. Immediately, the water beneath his feet transformed into chains, tightly wrapping around his ankles, accompanied by Hao Yan's profound lesson about adaptability. Ouyang Hao struggled desperately to pull his feet out of the water trap, but in vain, while his opponent mocked him, saying he was just a mere imitator who understood nothing about the essence of power. Ouyang Hao tensed his body, exerting all his inner strength to escape, but realized he was completely helpless against the water's grip. He panicked intensely, sweat pouring off him as he felt the terrifying pressure tightening around his body. Why is it so tight? The merciless water rose higher, tightly wrapping around his throat and splashing directly into his face, making the pampered young master begin to choke. Ouyang Hao's eyes rolled back, water filling his nose and mouth, allowing him only to utter in despair, "I can't breathe." Hao Yan activated his domineering state with glowing red eyes, sneering that a 0-star good-for-nothing was teaching a 3-star genius a lesson. He turned to Lee Keita and delivered a stern lecture, asserting that those who use power to harm others are no different from monsters. Lee Keita stood frozen in place, his face drained of color as he witnessed this unbelievable sight. Hao Yan calmly manipulated the water columns, hanging both Ouyang Hao and his lackeys upside down in the air, making Lee Keita exclaim, "No way!" Ouyang Hao screamed in extreme bitterness and humiliation as he hung suspended in midair. "You're cheating!" The battle ended swiftly outside the towering lecture hall, marking the pathetic downfall of the bully. Dean Liang sat solemnly in his office, hands clasped, interrogating who had initiated the fight. Ouyang Hao immediately pointed at his opponent, vehemently arguing that his group had been bullied first, while Hao Yan stood there with a cold, indifferent expression. The pampered young master gritted his teeth in resentment, seeing Hao Yan's nonchalant attitude as if he couldn't be bothered. The dean calmly interrupted, concluding with a sharp remark that Ouyang Hao himself had admitted to starting the altercation. Ouyang Hao was speechless, his face drained of color as he realized he had just walked right into a trap because of his hasty mouth. Dean Liang meticulously listed his 3 grave offenses: threatening new students, abusing his abilities, and his unrepentant, arrogant attitude. The dean pushed up his glasses dangerously, sternly declaring that with his authority, he could easily expel this unruly student immediately. Ouyang Hao broke out in a cold sweat, panicking intensely and shouting back at the dean, disbelieving that he was being expelled. He slammed his hand on the table, yelling at Dean Liang that he didn't have the authority to do that, in his utmost despair. The office door suddenly swung open, and a mysterious figure stepped in, interrupting the argument with a challenging tone that heightened the tension. The office door burst open, and Ouyang's father entered with an arrogant demeanor, a cigar in his mouth, loudly demanding to know who dared to expel his precious son. Hao Yan glanced over, immediately recognizing this man as an influential figure who had appeared in high-level meetings but rarely spoke. The old man took a puff from his cigar, recalling how his incompetent youngest son had failed the previous exam, and he had accepted that fairly, like a reasonable person. He sat cross-legged on the sofa with a condescending attitude, bringing up how the Ouyang family had poured mountains of money into the school to pressure them against expelling his eldest son. Seeing his old man come to his rescue, Ouyang Hao immediately changed his attitude from panic to smugness, sneering at Hao Yan. Thinking his opponent was about to be kicked out, the pampered young master smirked contemptuously with a cold snort, mocking Hao Yan for trying so hard to get into a top school only to be expelled on the very first day. Dean Liang remained unfazed by the financial pressure, coldly asserting that donations and disciplinary violations were two entirely different matters. The dean pushed up his glasses gravely, his sharp eyes delivering a firm statement that concepts could not be swapped to cover up wrongdoing. Old man Ouyang chuckled dangerously, brazenly threatening that a portion of the school's budget came from his pockets, so the dean should think 7 times before speaking. Seeing his opponent resort to bullying tactics, Dean Liang calmly leaned back against his desk and decided to call Vice Principal Fu Ning to arbitrate the matter thoroughly. Old man Ouyang smirked meaningfully, confidently stating that he fully trusted Vice Principal Fu Ning's judgment. Hao Yan began to sweat profusely, his face turning pale, fearing that Fu Ning's scrutinizing nature would expose his true identity as the ultimate slayer. Seeing his opponent flinch, Ouyang Hao seized the opportunity to boast arrogantly, mocking that poor commoners would never be able to compare to privileged children like him. The dean didn't bother to argue, picking up the phone and calling his boss, Fu Ning, directly, requesting her presence at the scene to conclude the matter immediately. Hanging up decisively, the dean adjusted his glasses and coldly announced that the vice principal would arrive to make a judgment within 5 minutes. Fu Ning held a dossier labeled Ouyang in her hand, smirking triumphantly because these prey had walked right into her trap just as she had finished scrutinizing all their dark information. It turned out that the legendary slayer himself had personally instructed Fu Ning to thoroughly investigate and fairly deal with the Ouyang family's seat on the council. The room door burst open, and Fu Ning's powerful figure stepped out into the hallway, preparing to clean up the mess that had just been reported. Old man Ouyang, still unaware of his impending doom, waved his hand, calling his precious son to rest on the sofa, with an arrogant attitude right in the teacher's lounge. Ouyang Hao walked past Hao Yan with a sneer, strongly taunting that the skill of being born into the right family was more important than hard-earned strength. The Ouyang father and son stood posing arrogantly. The son, with a bruised face, still tried to flash a mocking smile next to his father, who was arrogantly puffing on a cigar. The powerful click-clack of high heels echoed as Fu Ning's long legs in black stockings entered the room, completely changing the atmosphere. As soon as Fu Ning appeared, she launched a preemptive strike with a polite smile, subtly asking if old fox Ouyang was so idle that he neglected his company to meddle in others' affairs. Old man Ouyang laughed heartily, waving his hand as if he were the boss, casually boasting that he was just idle and bored, so he dropped by to visit. While smiling and chatting on the outside, old man Ouyang was secretly plotting, gleefully thinking that Fu Ning was showing him respect, so he planned to teach Director Liang a lesson he'd never forget. Fu Ning turned to question the situation, and Director Liang immediately accused Ouyang Hao directly of mercilessly bullying new students by abusing his power and influence. Old man Ouyang shamelessly dismissed his son assaulting others as a trivial matter, while Fu Ning maintained a mysterious smile, playing along with this insipid story. She pushed up her glasses dangerously, posing a highly damaging question: whether expelling this precious son was enough to solve the problem. Fu Ning crossed her arms over her chest, exuding an overwhelming aura of authority as she prepared to deliver a decisive blow, leaving her opponent no time to react. A sharp, cold glint flashed in Fu Ning's eyes behind her glasses as she flatly declared that permanent expulsion was the most fitting end to this farce. Ouyang father guffawed, slapping his thigh, nodding repeatedly, mistakenly believing that Fu Ning was punishing his son's enemy exactly as he wished. Fu Ning immediately poured cold water on him, declaring that the one who had to pack up and leave school to re-enroll next year was none other than his precious son, Ouyang Hao. Old man Ouyang sprang up like a coiled spring, his face paling as he cried out miserably, realizing that his beloved son was the official victim of the expulsion notice. Still refusing to believe the harsh truth, Ouyang father stammered, asking if there was some terrible mistake with the name Jin Haoyan. The vice president responded with a scornful look, coldly asserting that the context of the story was already too clear to argue further. Ouyang Hao broke out in a cold sweat, pointing at his swollen, plate-like face and wailing that he was the one who had been thoroughly beaten. Fu Ning looked at him as if he were trash, sarcastically remarking that if he bullied a newbie and still lost miserably, then his academic achievements all this time must have been fake or fraudulent. Ouyang father, shamed into anger, gritted his teeth and glared, pulling out his investor card to threaten to cut funding, hoping to pressure the school. Fu Ning's back exuded arrogance and power, completely unmoved by the old Parvenus money-laced threats. She turned back with a deadly, challenging smile, asking in return what old man Ouyang planned to do next, or how he wanted to resolve this issue. Ouyang father pointed directly at Haoyan's face, yelling to expel him immediately and permanently banish this thorn in his side from the hunter community. Fu Ning couldn't help but laugh at the old man's delusion, covering her mouth as she let out a scornful and mocking chuckle. The Ouyang father and son looked bewildered, like cows wearing hats, and the old man frowned irritably, asking what on earth was so funny about this tense situation. She coldly looked down at the small fry, concluding flatly that his pathetic ignorance was the funniest thing here. The remark was like a slap to the face, making Ouyang father furious. He stared wide-eyed, unable to believe his ears, being publicly humiliated by a secretary. Fu Ning turned her back and walked away proudly, boldly declaring that Slayer's principle was to unite and protect humanity, not to use power to oppress the weak as the Ouyang family was doing. She casually sat with her legs crossed over the armrest, fully displaying her long legs, admitting that he had indeed spent a lot as a VIP, but the purpose was to create fair opportunities, not to buy power. Fu Ning's eyes were as sharp as knives, as she flatly declared that his money meant nothing to the academy or the guild, challenging him to withdraw his investment and see how society would crush the Ouyang family. Ouyang father broke out in a cold sweat, his face drained of all color, as he realized the dangerously threatening implication behind that deadly smile. The old man began to tremble, wondering if he had just accidentally stepped into a hornet's nest, while his precious son still stood bewildered beside him, oblivious to the situation. Ouyang Hao still grinned with his swollen face, overly confident as he flaunted his shareholder status like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Ouyang father's face turned pale as he yelled at his son to shut up, immediately before his mouth got him into more trouble, leaving the boy stunned into silence. The old man broke out in a cold sweat, offering a pathetic conciliatory smile to ease the atmosphere, but only received a look of contempt and disgust from the vice president. Fu Ning coldly delivered the death sentence, return the sponsorship money and permanently expel Ouyang Hao, just like the catastrophic, ruinous end of the Zhou family before them. She turned to order Director Liang to decisively handle this matter, and instructed him never to bother her with the trivial affairs of such trash again. Seeing his precious son still picking his nose, bewildered and oblivious to the situation, Ouyang father was stunned, wondering if the price for this bullying habit was too high. Memories of the Zhou family's downfall flooded back, making him tremble. He couldn't accept that his life's work was about to vanish into thin air, just because of a foolish son. An extremely cruel glint flashed in his eyes as the old fox's brain calculated a cold-blooded truth. He could always have another son, but lost money was gone forever. Ouyang Hao shivered, breaking out in a cold sweat, as he saw his father staring at him from behind like a beast preparing to devour its own kind. Ouyang father cried out miserably, calling the vice president's name, ready to abandon all dignity and sacrifice his precious son to save the family at the last minute. Old man Ouyang cast aside all dignity, prostrating himself on the floor, confessing all his mistakes and begging for mercy from his superior. His precious son, Ouyang Hao, still oblivious, rushed to help his father up and loudly cursed Fu Ning, calling her a scoundrel. Slap! A thunderous slap from the father sent the damned son flying straight to the floor before he could utter another piece of trash. The old man yelled like a madman, cursing his idiotic son to shut up and immediately kneel to apologize if he wanted to keep his dog's life. Fu Ning sat with her legs crossed, watching the show, then coldly bestowed a final bit of grace upon the one who knew when to turn back. Old man Ouyang's face hardened, and a cruel glint flashed in his eyes as he decided he had to teach his son a lesson he'd never forget. Ouyang Hao lay flattened on the floor, his swollen face covered in blood, his eyes vacant, unable to understand why his father had beaten him so badly. A dry thud echoed as Fu Ning maintained her cold, emotionless expression throughout the domestic violence scene. While the old man was beating his son to a pulp amidst a cloud of dust, Hao Yan stood with his arms crossed, looking away with a bored expression. The vice president arrogantly pushed up her glasses, then ordered a retreat, leaving Old Man Ouyang private space to handle his family matters himself. The vice president strode powerfully on her red-soled high heels, then ordered Jin Haoyan to stop eavesdropping and get out of there immediately. While the two leisurely departed, behind them, Old Man Ouyang was still screaming, teaching his precious son an unforgettable lesson about the family's disgrace. Ouyang Hao's miserable screams echoed throughout the room, making Hao Yan shiver as he mused about this father-son bond as heavy as Mount Tai, but it was best not to beat someone to death. The door closed with a decisive click, completely separating the civilized world outside from the bloody parenting scene within. Hao Yan broke out in a cold sweat, then forced a smile and offered flattering words about the vice president's formidable work-handling abilities to dispel the tense atmosphere. Ignoring the empty flattery, Fu Ning turned around and directly questioned him, asking if he was the famous Zero, star-awakened good-for-nothing known throughout the school. He broke out in a cold sweat, being scrutinized so closely, fearing that her discerning eyes would see through his perfect disguise if she continued to stare. She provocatively leaned closer, poking his chest with her finger, wondering why an ability like copy couldn't have its star level measured. Fu Ning walked around, examining him like a test subject, asserting that there had never been a precedent for someone with the copy ability having such a display error. Her sharp eyes behind her glasses flashed with insight as she delivered a shocking conclusion. His level had exceeded the measurement limits of the machines. Hao Yan flinched, vehemently denying it. He waved his hands and gesticulated, explaining that if he were that formidable, he would have been famous long ago and wouldn't have needed to struggle with the entrance exam. Fu Ning didn't let up, leaning in provocatively and lifting his chin. She suspected he was a hidden master who liked to play the pig to eat the tiger, but Hao Yan could only inwardly smile wryly because his clash with Ouyang Hao had already caused too much commotion. Hao Yan's gaze sharpened as he realized the woman before him was truly a tough nut to crack and far more dangerous than she appeared. The eccentric teacher unexpectedly changed her demeanor, teasing that someone who liked to hide wouldn't dare to argue with her, then said she'd see him again after the semester began. Fu Ning's beautiful face leaned in with a meaningful smile, as she declared she would give the little student special attention, sending shivers down the listener's spine. Fu Ning turned on her heel and walked away proudly, ordering Director Liang to return to the office with her to discuss work, leaving Hao Yan rooted to the spot. Watching their retreating figures disappear, Hao Yan finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief, fortunate that the dangerous woman hadn't activated her abilities to scrutinize him thoroughly. Night fell, enveloping the quiet dormitory area, bringing an end to a tumultuous day filled with intense mental battles. As soon as he returned to his room, Hao Yan collapsed onto his bed with a tired thud, limbs splayed out as if wanting to give up everything after the stressful series of events. Li Keita, sitting on the opposite bed, curiously asked about Director Liang's verdict regarding his roommate's fate. Hao Yan lay sprawled on the bed with an indifferent expression, casually delivering the shocking news that the rich kid Ouyang Hao had officially been expelled from the academy. Li Keita was utterly shocked upon hearing this, his mouth agape in disbelief, as that guy had a powerful father on the board of directors who protected him fiercely. Hao Yan rested his hands behind his head leisurely, asserting that this training ground was meant to cultivate god-slayers and demon exterminators, not a marketplace for immature kids to form factions. The bespectacled friend gave a wry, philosophical smile, bitterly admitting that he had been too naive to think this cruel world would open its arms to protect the weak. Li Keita scratched his head awkwardly, his face flushing as he thanked his roommate for saving his rock-bottom morale. Hao Yan looked bewildered, not understanding anything. It turned out his boast about a 0, star punching a 3, star had inadvertently filled his friend with renewed vigor. He sat up, boasting like a god, declaring that a powerful awakening was merely an initial advantage, pay to win, while relentless grinding, hardcore grinding, was the true path of the strong. Li Keita seemed to receive a 200% morale buff, his eyes shining with determination as he clenched his fists and promised not to be a dead weight for the team to carry. Realizing this was a rare amplification-type support, Hao Yan immediately pointed to himself to claim the spot, demanding that his friend prioritize buffing him before battle. Li Keita imagined himself buffing his teammates with immense power, but still felt insecure, thinking his current weak abilities could only slightly increase the team's damage, not carry anyone. Hao Yan concluded with a classic philosophical statement, asserting that a small buff could sometimes be enough to turn the tide of an entire game. The jingling bell rang, signaling that the time had come, pulling the students back to reality. The group settled into their seats in the classroom under the watchful eye of a stern woman, awaiting their subject teacher. Yingying turned to ask about the schedule, while Lee Keita had already taken the opportunity to recharge by immediately dozing off. The blonde girl lectured him, reminding him that the first class was dry theory, and he shouldn't dream of rushing into dungeons to farm monsters right away. Hao Yan froze for 5 seconds, suddenly remembering that he was the one who wrote this curriculum back when he was a server admin, but had now completely forgotten it. He clung to the wall in despair, wondering how someone accustomed to physical action like him could survive 3 hours of this mental torture. The teacher stood confidently at the podium, introducing herself as the one in charge of the Theoretical Studies department. She confidently introduced herself as Kelly, unleashing a wide-area damage smile that made everyone swoon. The students, including Huo Xin, were immediately enchanted and sent out heart emojis upon meeting the legendary teacher. Lee Keita squirmed like a tadpole due to the teacher's cuteness, making Yingying beside him exasperatedly tell him to calm down, while Hao Yan was still sound asleep, drooling. Who would have thought that Yingying herself would be immediately enchanted, her eyes turning into red hearts as she admitted the teacher was irresistibly adorable. Hao Yan, just waking up, rubbed the bridge of his nose in annoyance, not understanding why these guys were so hyped up over the word adorable. Keely stretched to write on the board, her posture fully showcasing her deadly curves, making anyone who looked feel their eyes burn with her charm. She wasn't just a pretty face, but a genuine genius, achieving a 5-star awakening at lightning speed, and possessing a brain that contained an entire library of knowledge. Hao Yan revealed his true nature as a womanizer, his eyes gleaming as he admitted he could never get tired of looking at her, completely ignoring the old director making a fool of himself in his thoughts. Kelly playfully winked and began her lecture on dungeon strategies, holding a pointer and warning the students not to underestimate dry theory. The male students below collectively shouted loudly as if pumped with adrenaline, vowing to live and die by every golden word from the beautiful teacher. The entire building shook with the resounding, spirited cheers as the class officially began with the topic of F-rank dungeon exploration.